In the Wurail kingdom, a kid in a crisp business suit stands frozen in a towering throne room, completely lost, while the word hero keeps slamming through his thoughts, and he can't shake the feeling he's absolutely not worthy. The stern-faced king makes his move, 3 veils are thrown aside, and with a booming command he seals the truth. That's right, you're the hero from another world. He blurts out what it even means as a hooded mage drops to one knee in front of him. And the moment the crystal-topped staff snaps to a glowing light, the whole thing screams, "You're the one," leaving the man reeling. He blurts out, wondering if he's got any special gift, and the king's voice cuts through, "Sure, they didn't find any hero-level skills, but he does have 3 built-in powers: hero's growth, omnilingualism, and environmental adaptation." Revelation slams the other mages into panic, everyone shouting that the summoning was supposed to work, so what went wrong? One mage runs to the king and swears the outcome can't be undone. The king demands a solution, and the mage drops a terrifying order: decapitate him. Lashes of terror hit the young man like a battering ram, and with the mage's voice booming through the air, he begs. Because his beheading is coming, the so-called hero is branded useless and execution is demanded. The second response hits, the king snaps his arms wide in pure fury, roaring that 15 years have already crawled by since the last summoning, and another 15 will have to pass before they can even try again. Rage churns in his chest as he snarls at the gods, demanding to know why they dragged in someone this useless. While a mage scrambles to soothe him, the king just stares like a man drowning, sure they can't survive on their own, and haunted by the question of which part of the ritual went wrong. He roars at the hooded figures, demanding they stop and barking that their useless lineage has no claim on him, while the mages flinch hard, stunned by the sheer fury in his voice. When the king's decree hits, the summoned man panics and begs him to wait, he'll do anything at all. But the king just stares, ice-cold and unimpressed, saying there's nothing a useless man like him can possibly do. Just as the king whirls away, a minister steps in and bows low, then the monarch snaps, "What's on your mind?" And the minister answers, "I've got a proposal about the summoned man." In some far-off spot like a lumber mill, nobody would even bat an eye if the hero vanished, so he grins like a villain and lets his words roll out with cruel intent. So they cooked up a full-on deception. The whole kingdom got fed the lie that the hero's summoning worked, the real summoner got locked away to train, and he only surfaced for ceremonies, while a fake hero was quietly built in the dark. And just like that, the true summoning man was shoved aside and 15 years vanished. Now he's shoved into a roaring forge, where one smith clocks that the next hero's summoning is almost here, and another straight-up warns that their time together is about to run out. He smiles warmly and scratches the back of his head, thinking about it. Thanks to their guidance for the past 15 years, he's finally able to craft all kinds of things, a world away from the day he first arrived, when he couldn't even forge a simple name. The master blacksmith slams him with the truth: "Your skill isn't owed to anyone, it's what you earned." He groans that all this talent is getting squandered on basic repairs, not forged into something worthy. The summoned man stares at his hammer, shoulders sinking, and quietly accepts it. This is just the life fate handed him. He stared at his scarred, calloused hands, and the 15 years hammering in the royal forge hit him like a wave, while to the kingdom he was just some decoration, a secret buried deep out of sight. His job was dirty, brutal, and downright dangerous, but it felt way more worth it than that lifeless desk gig he quit back in Japan, because here, he only had to work daylight hours. 15 years ago, nobody would have him, so he swallowed the rejection, focused on his craft, and even if all he made was one nail, dedication turned that small start into a real life. He spun around to face his fellow blacksmiths, the brothers he'd forged beside for years, and poured out his heartfelt gratitude. Since he got summoned into this world, he's been replaying every step of his journey, facing brutal hardships, sure, but also stumbling into real companionship, until his life somehow feels whole, way more than he ever expected. Meanwhile, inside the royal castle, the moment everyone waited for finally crashed into reality. After 15 long years, the hero's summoning ritual was set to kick off with. Inside the throne room, King veiled in awe watched. Then a blinding light smashed out of the summoning circle, and the whole court erupted in cheers as the summoning finally worked. The light died down, and there they stood, 3 totally stunned strangers. A knight clad in shining armor strode up, welcoming them to the kingdom of Wurail, and introduced himself as Haiji, the legendary hero from before. Then the newcomer in a sharp business suit stepped forward and said she was in Dukan, right as the crowd erupted with that buzz of disbelief that they'd actually summoned both a hero and a magic user. She fidgets through her words, insisting they've got to get ready for the ceremony where the hero will finally be shown to the public. Then the king nods and says this is what will bring peace back to the whole country. The king snaps his focus to the man who used to be the hero, then offers him a fief as a reward, and his minister praises it as a peaceful, lovely land where he can finally rest and heal from 15 years of service. But the man just stays silent, because deep down he knows he's never even stepped onto a battlefield. He drops to one knee before the throne, bows his head, and joyfully accepts the king's offer. After accepting his new post, he steps out of the castle, and there, right outside the walls, a carriage is waiting for him like it's been summoned. He turns back to the Forge crew, thanking them with real gratitude, and they wave him off with bright smiles, urging him to drop by any time he can. With the carriage jolting ahead, he grips his seat and braces himself for the ride, then laughs at the wild truth that he's already 40. Wondering what kind of life his brand new lands are going to throw at him. The crushing weight of the moment hits him like a truck, and hot tears rip down his face. He hates himself for breaking, just praying he can disappear somewhere quiet. His carriage rattles on through the countryside, and as he rides, he can't shake the thought that his 15 years in the palace were non-stop work, but never the kind of life that makes you a true hero. Still, he's sure the newly summoned man, Joji Sagami, will slam strength into the kingdom. He rode for 20 grueling days from the royal capital, and when the carriage finally rolled in, the driver told him, "From the hilltop, you can see every inch of your new domain." The former hero thanked him with a stiff, aching smile, then stepped out, back screaming from the journey's toll. He stood on the hilltop as the wind tore around him, staring out over the land, then disbelief crashed across his face the moment he saw what was out there. "So this is it," he breathed while the driver stayed quiet, watching him in silence. A mile-wide sea of trees sprawled out in front of him, and he blurted out, "Is this really my new territory?" The weight of it finally hit. Disbelief crashed over him like a tidal wave as he kept asking if he'd really been dropped here. He couldn't stop wondering, was there even a single village or soul out here in this dead, empty wasteland? So there was nothing left but to push into the woods and check himself, and the deeper he went, the more he found a crumbling little hut hiding in the trees. He tiptoed into the little building, and the moment he stepped inside, dust and neglect screamed that nobody had touched it in ages. Yet right there, he could already see that with some scrubbing, that plain bed frame would turn into something usable. He scanned the main room, then spotted a tiny structure through the doorway and couldn't help wondering if it was a shed, because this plain little setup looked like it was all his new home had. His eyes locked onto that tough stone structure inside the hut, then it hit him, a hearth. No doubt someone had left it here from a king, and suddenly he wondered if the king was better than he ever gave him credit for. Trapped in a wrecked ruin overrun with vines, the armored hero scans for his next move, but his real priority hits hard: water, and the moment he looks around, there's not a river in sight, not a single well trace anywhere nearby. After testing his new powers, he thrusts out a gauntleted hand and shouts a spell. Then a glowing sphere of pure water forms in midair above his palm, shimmering with raw magic. Water splashes into the wooden bucket until it's overflowing, and relief hits him hard. Turns out even beginner-level magic can be this useful. Now that his thirst's gone, his focus snaps to the next problem: food. He starts carving a stick into a crude spear, then freezes when he realizes there's nothing edible within reach. And the idea of pushing into that thick forest hits like a wall, because forging the tools he'd need for a real hunt would take way too long. He figures that if there's a river anywhere, he can at least try to reel in some fish. Then, while he's spiraling over his situation, his eyes lock onto something lurking just past the ruins. A sudden breeze slashes through the air, swiping a few stray leaves right across his vision. His eyes lock onto the motion, and then, bam, he spots something he never expected: a huge open field drowned in gorgeous white flowers. His eyes snap to a huge, shining thing sitting right in the middle of the clearing, and he just freezes, shocked that something like this could exist in the heart of the forest, staring like, "What am I even looking at? Is this really a gigantic gold ingot?" He marched up to the colossal golden monument, stunned by how massive it looked inches away. Then he swung his gauntlet and clapped ** it against the surface, and the shock hit him. It didn't feel like anything he expected. Suddenly, the ground started to quake, and a massive golden mass surged forward with a bone-rattling rumble. A massive, leathery wing burst open with a thunderous snap, and he yelped in panic at the sudden chaos. The creature ripped the disguise away and fully revealed a breathtaking white-scale dragon. It dipped its head, that massive eye locking onto the fallen man, and he stared right back, mind spinning as he tried to convince himself this was really a dragon and wrestled with one terrifying question. What in the world was a creature like that doing here? The creature spoke and its voice thundered across the clearing, saying this was the forest of Dalida, a sacred haven where gods and spirits live, and that it stood here as the guardian of this land. Then it called itself Cruel, the holy dragon, and barked a ruthless command. Leave right now, because this world wasn't meant for him. Still reeling from the order, he could only stare as the colossal dragon dropped onto the bed of blossoms, its massive body swallowing the whole landscape. He closes in on the great beast, yells its name, and demands, "What's wrong?" And the dragon squirms, snapping that its scales are way too thick so it can't reach that awful itch with its own claws. He steps in and asks if that dragon's scales can even feel pain. Cruel snaps back that those scales are built like armor, so they don't feel pain or even an itch. Understanding and grit flash across his face, and he orders Krull to wait, then declares he's about to forge a set of tools right now. Right as the dragon finally drops into its weight, the hero's promise to forge tools lingers, hanging in the air like a spark that's about to ignite. He throws together a makeshift forge in the clearing, furnace roaring, anvil set, quenching trough ready, and with one satisfied nod he declares it good to go. He kicks off his work and checks the furnace. Yeah, it's hot enough now, and when he's sure, he tells himself that with this setup, he'll forge everything he needs with zero trouble. With a blacksmith's apron snapped over his tunic, he hoists the hammer high. Everything he told himself to do is finally done. With eyes blazing, he slams the hammer down on that glowing metal. Wham! Sparks explode, and a razor-bright ring of steel tears through the forest as the shaping finally starts. He worked non-stop at the forge, hammering hot metal in a blazing rhythm, each clang roaring through the workshop, and with tongs in hand he gripped the glowing piece tight, then drove it into shape with fierce, pinpoint blows. That brutal heat poured over him, sweat popped onto his brow, and he wiped it off in a quick snap, then locked back in, eyes still glued to the job. Once the shaping was done, he yanked the glowing metal and slammed it into a trough of water, steam exploding upward as the whole piece cooled in an instant. He took a hard breath, bracing for the grind still waiting, and counted up what he had left, 8 or 10 more of the items. All right, one down. Now he locked in, refocused, and pushed to keep going. While he kept toiling, the one he served started to wake, something huge and reptilian. I inched the door open as a cruel voice snapped, "Wake up, Cruel." The great dragon was fully awake now, and it stared down at itself like, "What is this?" Massive metal staples were clamping its scales together, and it could tell, no building job, no medicine tool. Then the gaze lunged at the human standing there. "Human. So you've come back?" the dragon rumbled. "Good you're awake," the hero shot back, breathless with relief. The dragon reeled in the new sensations, and as it did, that horrible itch vanished for good, no pain at all. The hero hauled out a massive wooden tub packed with the meal he'd already prepared, then told the dragon, "Eat up, boost your blood." He pointed out that the spinach was loaded with iron and would help build what you need. The dragon looked genuinely impressed that this human could even manage something so iron-heavy. "It's a small price," the hero urged, "so please take even a bite." He watches the holy dragon tear into that massive meal, then leans in like, "So, how is it?" From the nearly empty basin, a thought floods back, pure satisfaction. "Delicious." The man exhales and finally smiles, totally relieved. He breaks into a happy laugh, tells the dragon to chow down and rest easy, and promises, if this is what it craves, he'll give it as much as it wants. And that giant beast just stares at him, caught in a quiet, stunned realization of what a humankind heart can do. That night, after all the terror and turmoil, he finally fell asleep in peace beside the colossal dragon, and under a blanket of stars they both just rested. He wakes up the next morning buried in a sea of white flowers, realizing he must have slept through the whole night. And when he finally props himself up, he sees a figure looming right over him. A horned young woman leans in and asks, "Are you awake?" And he jerks, stunned. Who is she, and how does she know to call him human? Then his mind races. Did she really watch him all night catching that name? He realizes it's Haji, the one the soldiers kept calling him. She just blurts out his name and suddenly you're the Haji, while he stares at her completely, utterly lost and still in shock. She heaps praise on him, calling him an amazing person for bandaging a wound with iron, then smirks and tells him, "I'm cruel." The moment her name hits, shock rips through him like a bolt of lightning. As he gapes, the room goes dead silent. Then she asks, "Are you embarrassed?" and lifts her top to bear a long, stitched scar across her abdomen. She says it's nearly healed, but the sight hits him so hard he panics, blushing, and blurts for her to cover up. He sat at the water's edge, still stunned by everything that just happened, while Cruel stood beside him and let out a breath of relief, thankful he was okay and sure it was his own strength that kept him standing. Then she leaned in and called to him, saying she had a request, so he snapped his gaze over, confused, and repeated it like, "A request." His eyes bulged with pure disbelief, sweat sliding down his temple as he stammered, and when he leaned in with that bright, flushed intensity, Cruel straight up said what she wanted. She craved iron and she wanted him to take her as his disciple. Above the vast canopy of the forest of gods and spirits, Daltia, the sky opened wide, because right here, the hero and the holy dragon, Cruel, collided in a moment that changed everything. In the royal dining hall, a feast is raging right now. Two hands tear into an ornate plate, and one of them wears a ring that's catching the light. Shiner, as king sat veiled at the head of a long table while his minister poured him a drink, and the king admitted. He doubted Cain for a while, but now he could see the new hero, Cain, is proving exactly how useful he can be. He scoffs, dismissing the old hero like he's just wall decor, then wonders if that guy is getting crushed somewhere right now. While the minister flashes a nasty grin and fully agrees, declaring the former hero is useless and nowhere near the power of the new one. The minister keeps rubbing it in, smirking that after 15 long years away from the palace, that former hero is probably getting chewed up by some demon, until his wicked cackle gets slammed shut when the hall doors explode open and a fully armored knight stumbles in, yelling that he needs an audience. A brutal intrusion slams into the room and both the king and his minister jump. Then the king blurts out 3 stunned shouts as the knight, Haji, drops to one knee, gasping like he just ran through hell, and delivers the blow. The Royal Knight Brigade has been wiped out completely. The king demands answers. How could his never-failing knights fall? The minister can barely breathe and Haji snaps it into focus. Their weapons crumbled like paper, useless the moment they met their foe. The whole royal court freezes in stunned silence like the air just died. Meanwhile, in a cozy vine-cloaked cottage, everything finally feels calm. Cruel in her humanoid body can't stop grinning as she wanders into what she calls Haiji's place, poking at anything that catches her eye, while Haiji, now dressed like a normal civilian, just watches her with a look of resignation and teasingly complains that he's talking way too loosely to a young maiden like her. She shuts her eyes and smirks, and right in front of the stunned Haji, she casually drops the bomb that she's 170 years old, still pretty young for a dragon, and it leaves him completely frozen like he can't find a single word. With a deadly serious look, she tells Heiji that the demon tribe caused her injuries, then she pulls back her side to show a big stitched-up scar. She leans in and says they're hunting the divine beast Delata. Heiji, eyeing the wound, blurts out, "So, how did you get hurt like that?" She quickly looks away, cheeks burning as she admits she messed up, then swears she never loses to them. He watches her and mutters that her brute behavior is just the way she is. Rage ignites from his comment and she snaps back, demanding to know why he's so hellbent on making her his disciple when she was trying to tell him something important. Then with a total switch, she blurts out that yes, she really does want in. He's stunned, flat out asking if she's serious, and she beams, confirming it as she explains it would be an honor to be taught by a fellow master of. She tilts her head up at him, confused and curious, and he just stares back down, drowning in thought. Then he realizes her fierce will is exactly the kind of reassurance he needs beside him. Once he's made up his mind, he looks up, meets her smiling face and nods, then announces they're opening a blacksmith shop together. She bursts with joy, clutches him in a tight embrace, and sobs his name in pure, grateful relief. Later, right there in their brand new workshop, she turns to him and demands to know why he's building weapons. Then he just nods, hands planted on his hips, confirming she's spot on. He blurts that if he's already been making weapons at his old job, he might as well forge something simple, like a kitchen knife, and then, leaning over a wooden crate, she asks what her job is supposed to be. He snaps his head toward her and tells her the only thing that matters is watching and learning. Today, her job is to study him close and carefully. She shoots her hand up with pure excitement, instantly agreeing. She stares in total awe as Haiji drives his forge like it's his whole world, pure, locked-in focus. Then he lets out a sharp breath, lifts his hammer high, and comes down on the glowing metal while his draconic eye burns with the same fierce heat. He wraps up his work, looking totally drained, and shoots Cruel an apology for losing his way during it, only for her to light up instantly, eyes blazing with excitement. She laughs that it was fascinating to watch and can't wait to make a kitchen knife herself. He tells Krull that this blade isn't a kitchen knife yet, then he slaps on a special powder, heats it up, and dries it off like a finishing ritual. Krull can't hold it in and blurts out, "So, is it finally done?" He tells her it's not ready yet, insisting the blade in front of them has no bite, no tenacity at all, and Cruel stares at him, baffled, demanding what he even means by tenacity. He breaks it down hard. Tenacity is the metal's built-in power to stay the way it's meant to be, no matter what. Then he straight up compares it to having guts, and the cruel laugh bursts out as she finally gets it. He keeps teaching, saying that low heat is the secret to drawing out the blade's edge, and right in the middle of it, he plunges the blazing steel straight into a trough of oil where it instantly hisses and spits steam. Cruel snaps, "What are you doing?" And he just smiles, cool as ice, explaining that after this step, all that's left is to polish it with the finishing touches done. He proudly raises the completed kitchen knife and declares it finished. Then he glares at the shining blade like a menace, stunned by how beautiful it looks. Her praise hits him like lightning and he practically bursts with confidence. He announces he'll forge 5 knives before the day ends and tells Cruel she'll be helping him too. All fired up, she can't stop herself from asking, "Do you really mean it?" She thrusts a fist into the sky, shouting with pure hype, and Hoggy matches her energy, confirming they're really going to forge a huge batch of knives and haul them to the nearby town to sell. They burst into a lively town square, where market stalls line the streets beneath strings of festive lights. But right as they sit there staring at those perfectly crafted knives, their excitement crashes. No one walks in and not a single customer shows up. AG scans the crowd as they stream by and clocks that this market is mostly young couples. Then a nearby merchant jumps in, saying the hot items are accessories and toys while the metal goods are getting straight up ignored. That hit Cruel sparks an idea: why haul swords to the market when they can sell them straight to mercenaries? Haiji weighs it up and you can practically see his thoughts shift to the thrill of forging deadly combat blades. Haji's thoughts get ripped apart when a sudden commotion erupts nearby. One young woman gets shoved hard to the ground, her goods skittering across the cobblestones, and as she begs for mercy, some guy barks at her to shut up, instantly yanking Haji's attention. He watches the merchant woman stumble up and square off with the armored man, pleading for her stolen sword back, insisting it's a prized weapon from her shop, while Haiji's sidekick Cruel grimaces with worry, pushing him to step in. The armored man slams her pleas aside and waves the blade for everyone to see. He brags it's a royal sword, light as a feather, tough as steel, and sharp enough to slice through a demon's hide. Then a young boy, standing there with the merchant, blurts out that his sister must have paid a fortune for a weapon this royal and fine. While the arrogant swordsman held his ground, Cruel's patience snapped. Then, from the sidelines, she let Haji know she hated people like him and begged for permission to cut him down. Right before she could move, Haiji dropped a steady hand on her head, his face dead serious as he ordered, "Wait." Haiji watched as the merchant boy lunged to take back his own property, but the swordsman immediately shoved him aside and tore him apart with insults. Sure, the blade was a real fine royal sword, yet it was still no excuse to manhandle someone else's weapon like that. He shot forward and jammed his kitchen knife right into the swordsman's falling strike. Steel screamed, and a flash of light burst across the room. The blast slammed through his blade and shattered it clean in half. He froze, staring at the broken hilt in his trembling hand, and he blurted out, "It broke a C." A crowd erupted in shock, blurting out, what trick could possibly beat a royal sword? While the disgraced swordsman bolted and swore he'd get revenge, a flustered Hoggy scrambled to tell the onlookers this wasn't some secret skill and it wasn't even the sword he'd been using. Just as he was about to press on, a young merchant woman rushed up, hands clasped tight, and blurted out her gratitude, thanking him again and again while calling him Sir Swordsman, and it clearly made him squirm. Then she pointed that simple blade, the one that just sealed the fight, and asked if he was a blacksmith, but Hagi shut that down fast, saying he wasn't a swordsman or a blacksmith at all, he was a cook, and the truth left her stunned. The young merchant woman freezes in shock, snatching her hand up to her mouth as disbelief hits. Then she blurts out, all stammering, "What kind of kitchen knife is this even?" Her shock flips into pure awe the moment she spots what it really is, an S-rank knife, stamped so simply as a kitchen knife made by Haji, gleaming like it's got a spotlight on it. He's still just as baffled. He stares at the blade, wondering how his own kitchen knife even got tagged as S-rank. In Warel, the ranking system is crystal clear. 8 levels total, with SS at the top reserved for divine tools and sacred treasures, and his creation is sitting just one tier beneath that mythic height. Spotting her opening, the merchant woman lunges in, asking if he'll sell it, and she instantly bumps her offer from 16 to 20 gold coins, a number that clearly leaves him stunned. Before he can even answer, Cruel bursts in grinning and swings 2 brand-new identical knives, and the merchant woman's eyes go even wider as she blurts out whether those are his creations too. Hyrule just smirks and blurts that these are insanely good S-rank items too, and in the background, Haiji can only stand there staring, remembering he only carried them along by pure chance. With her mind already made up, the merchant woman grips a heavy pouch of coins and declares, loud and fearless, that she's buying all 5 knives. No hesitation, no turning back. Her offer hits him like a lightning strike. His brain reels the exchange rate. 1 gold coin equals 10,000 yen, so 100 gold coins means a clean million yen on his very first day in this world. In a sun-drenched town square, the armored hero and his companion, Cruel, sink into an outdoor table as Cruel nods off mid-breath. Then a young woman strolls up with one look that screams, "Meeting S about to start." With a bright smile, she introduces herself as Filna Larsa, a traveling merchant, then greets them with warm politeness like it's truly her pleasure to meet them. He shoots her a tired look, takes a sip from his cup, nods along with her words, and then, right on the spot, whips the conversation around to address her straight up as Filna. She gets flustered by his blunt approach, wondering if he can really cough up 100 gold coins. Then she spots the battered, patched coat he's wearing and doubts him even more, blurting out apologies that if he's selling something at that price, she just can't pay. He gets her point, stays cool, and tells her the deal comes with one condition. Her eyes widen, then she nods, ready to hear him out. His mission was ruthless and crystal clear. He wanted an exclusive contract with her, swore he'd never sell his knives to anyone else, and vowed he'd drag her into his guild no matter what. Proposal stuns her, cold sweat beads on her brow as the meaning hits like a truck, an exclusive contract for an S-rank knife. The idea of being the only one who sells it makes her head spin. She clenches her composure, stares him down, and demands to know if he's truly serious, then cuts him off before he can reply, saying she's got terms of her own. The hero softly pats Cruel's head while she dozes contentedly on the table, and he admits he's got a hard time dealing with people, so with Cruel alone, he's done widening his circle. Then he whips his focus right back to Filnell and tells her exactly what needs doing, detailed procedures, no shortcuts. With a confident grin, she jumps in immediately, saying it's easy and leaving everything in her capable hands. She drops her gaze as he pulls out a tiny, hand-drawn map and points to a spot only he knows, telling her to go grab the items. Then she nods and slips into silence, agreeing without a word. Her calm nod instantly cracks into stunned disbelief when he blurts out the location, and her eyes go huge as she demands to know. Does he really live in Dalida Forest? Her surprise gets answered with Cruel's bright wave. He tells her, "If you get lost, I'll come find you." Then Felinal whips her eyes to the horned girl, scratching her head, trying to figure out what kind of beast man she's looking at. Then she straight up declares who she is. She's a holy dragon, so Filmal freezes, mouth open, completely stunned into silence. She can't process it, so she whips around to the hero, hand clamped over her mouth, stammering, "So you're the guardian deity of the Dalida Forest?" He looks off, sweat trickling as he admits, "Yeah, it's a complicated story." Those words paint their home in your mind. A lonely cabin tucked deep inside the hush of ancient, towering trees. A massive, freshly baked, pizza-like centerpiece stole the show at the celebratory feast, ringed by bowls piled high with food and drinks. This feast was no ordinary meal. It was a full-on special occasion, and Haiji leaned in close to a thrilled, wickedly delighted girl, explaining that with a little extra cash coming in they could finally splash out like this. She practically hovered over the table, eyes blazing as she took in every bite on the spread. She crammed in a huge bite and her face lit up with total bliss. She practically squealed how insanely delicious it was, and she couldn't stop raving that Haiji wasn't just a hero. He was also an absolute beast in the kitchen. Her joy practically burst from her as she soaked in that warm, satisfied feeling, determined to repay his kindness, so she declared she'd hunt for him as thanks. Hoggy snapped his head up, stunned, and blurted what she planned to bring back with. Without a single word, she snatched a bow off the wall and told him she was just borrowing it. Then she bolted out of the cabin before he could even blink, leaving him staring in confusion as he shouted after her. Moments later, the forest erupted with a deafening roar, and out of the shadows lunged a massive, dark-scaled dragon. So Haiji sprinted from the cabin, convinced it was his companion, and yelled cruelly, "You turn into a dragon." But the chaos wasn't what he expected. Haiji found Cruel slumped by a snapped bow, utterly crushed, and she told him she'd spotted a boar, yanked the bow as hard as she could, and it still shattered. Haiji sighed, told her not to cry, and reminded her that breaking it with full force on a normal bow was exactly the plan. She kept talking, and once that boar slipped away, Dragon came roaring after her, tailing her all the way. Then they stopped right in front of a dark cave mouth, the exact place that earlier roar came from. Haiji listened, and suddenly everything clicked. She pats Cruel's head with a soothing hand, telling her to trust him with everything. Then she lifts her gaze, eyes blazing wide with shock and bright hope. The moment he promises to forge a bow she can draw without it snapping, her face lights up. Bam! A huge, excited grin bursts across it like it couldn't wait. With this new purpose in his chest, he steps into his rough little workshop and stares at the job ahead. Because sure, iron would hit hard, but it would also make the bow brutally heavy. He drags his hand across his chin, deep in thought. If that bow is too heavy, it'll inevitably throw off the aim, and then the whole hunting weapon loses its point. Realizing iron won't cut it, he snaps to a decision. He has to hunt down a whole new material. Then he whips his gaze around, scanning everything like it might save him. His hunt drags him to a crate packed with unfamiliar, gleaming ingots, and when he spots the light silver metal, confusion hits. But he clocks it instantly as the missing piece he's been searching for. Right then, a brutal commotion from outside snaps his attention. He shouts for Cruel and finds her effortlessly clawing a massive trench with her bare hands. Then she just pauses like, "You want me to dig a hole outside?" He storms out and shouts for her to stop, because down in the giant pit she carved, the dazed dark dragon is staring up from the depths. After grilling her on why she did this, Haiji suddenly clicks, then announces he'll use this exact hole to forge a bow. The dragon looks up, completely and totally lost. He kicks off his blacksmithing lesson, laying out step 1 for Krull and whipping up a sand mold. Then, with that big pit she dug, he shows the next move, carving a wooden pattern into place. He even tells her he'll use a special agent to lock the sand tight around the pattern so it won't collapse. He drops to his knees and digs into the sand with laser focus, packing it tight until it hardens and clamps down around the wooden mold. Cruel stared in shock and blurted that the sand had turned solid, then told her the next move was to gently pull away the wooden pattern. When the pattern finally rips away, it leaves behind a crystal-clear imprint in the sand, like the universe just stamped it. So the first stage is officially done. Next comes the 4th step, casting. Haiji orders Cruel to haul a crucible brimming with blazing molten metal, and she doesn't even hesitate. He pauses, stunned for a second by what he just demanded, then realizes who she is too late before his focus snaps back and he barks, "Now pour it all into the hole." She snatches up the blazing crucible with bare hands and shrugs that her own flames burn hotter. Then Haiji stares in shock as she pours the liquid metal straight into the sand mold. Once it cools, she yanks out the finished metal bar and seals the 5th, final step. Cradling the finished piece, Kurowa can't hide her shock at how insanely light it feels, and Haiji grins as he explains it's iron but made with a metal from his world, aluminum, and you can see how proud he is that the whole experiment actually worked. She stared at the metal bar, confused at how light it felt, and HG told her this aluminum was tough but easy to mold. So that's exactly why he planned to bend it into a bow. She read his intentions instantly and jumped on the job, and he let out a chuckle, because even with her insane power, flexing that special alloy was still no easy feat. With a hard grunt, she threw every ounce of strength into it, bending that metal bar until it curved perfectly, and then she lifted the finished bow shape high so Hagi could see it, triumphant. He shoved the finished bow into her hands, grin and all, and urged her to fire it up, telling her he'd woven her dragon scales into the design himself. The moment she pulled the string back, the whole thing flared to life, glowing with a soft, eerie light. Her eyes sparkled with pure joy and she blurted out that Hagi was unreal, because that bow stayed rock solid, not a single crack, not even after her insane strength slammed into it. While she was busy celebrating her new weapon in the background, Haiji suddenly went quiet and uneasy, replaying the whole Kaga incident in his head and worrying whether this bow would even work. Then Cruel spun toward him and asked if she could watch him too, and Haiji agreed without hesitation. Their hunt kicked off in full force. Hidden in the shadows, they spotted their target, a giant tusked boar. Haiji froze, staring in pure disbelief at how enormous it was, wondering if this monster was really the one they were after. Cruel didn't waste a second. He nodded and told Haiji to keep his eyes locked on it. She yanked the bowstring back with brutal force, and the aluminum frame groaned as if it might snap, while Haiji went rigid with panic, yelling at the top of his lungs that she was yanking way too hard. With a razor-sharp twang, Cruel snaps the bowstring free, her eyes blazing as the arrow rips through the forest, and the bow strains so hard it can barely hold together. The arrow hits dead center, boom! A blinding flash erupts as it smashes the giant boar, and the impact tears through the nearby foliage like a shockwave. She whips around to face him, eyes blazing with excitement, and blurts out that the bow he forged is straight up amazing. While Haiji, still stuck there, completely stunned by what he just saw, can only manage one thing: it's her who's truly incredible. Cruel claims it was the bow's power, swearing any normal guy couldn't drop a demon boar with one shot. Meanwhile, Haiji's mind drifts, a bead of sweat sliding down his temple. That weapon was just a plain aluminum bow, the kind you'd match to an S-rank kitchen knife. And then a sickening question sparks in his head. What the hell did he forge exactly? In a cozy wooden cabin tucked deep among the trees, Haiji hovers over a bubbling pot while Tsuru leans in close, her tail twitching as she grins and says the meal looks absolutely delicious. The party stew churns and boils, smashing big chunks of meat as thick steam rockets into the air. He tells her about the brown soup. AG breaks it down like a secret recipe. It's built on miso, made by fermenting soybeans with salt and koji. Then he scoops some into a bowl and urges her to dig in. Grinning through the moment, she raises a bite of meat to her mouth and thanks him. She bursts out in cheers, practically sparkling with joy as she declares at full volume just how insanely delicious it is. Haiji grins as he happily devours the meal, then reveals the meat was from the prey she hunted, and admits he's thrilled he chose to make the miso, because he learned that craft while he was living at the royal palace. His face shifts to pure focus as his eyes lock onto a plain kitchen knife, and the thought hits him: how on earth could an S-rank blade ever be forged from something that simple? Thought hit him like a punch. He suddenly remembered a stern, scarred man raising a blade at his face, screaming that Haji had always been coddled by his parents and was nothing but a useless waste who could only churn out Durank or E-rank items. He sat alone, letting that brutal memory crash and replay in his head, wondering in the quietest way whether his old master was even doing okay. That same master craftsman sat outside the grand building, puffing his pipe like a storm was brewing, wondering out loud if Haiji was even keeping up when his two coworkers, a bald blacksmith and a younger guy, froze in shock. The bald man snapped, "Why drag Haiji into this? Are you worried about him?" The master just scowled harder, snarling, "So explain what you mean." The bald blacksmith snapped at the master, bringing up how he'd screamed at Hagi and never even bothered to see him off, then replayed Hagi's awkward little smile while everyone stared, until the blacksmith gritted out that it had to be because Hagi couldn't craft anything in that specified range. His colleague's guess was dead wrong. Then the master craftsman erupted in fury and snapped that the swords and armor Haiji had made were only at the very bottom a rank. The bald man just stared, blurted a rank like he couldn't believe it, and the master whipped around, roaring, "Who in the world told you I was angry with Haiji?" Arms crossed, he laid out his reasoning. If he'd ever cut Haiji some slack, that kid would have slipped into complacency. He wasn't being harsh for fun, his strictness was the only way because Haiji's job was simple, craft B-rank items, nothing more. His colleagues still couldn't make sense of it and the younger craftsman blurts out, "Is making rank items actually bad?" Then, in a flashback, the master's voice roars, calling Hagi a fool for crafting rank gear, even though he'd been told straight up to make beer. In that moment, the master's rage was pure spectacle. He snarled that he couldn't bear seeing Haiji, then ordered the A-rank weapons handed to the soldiers before throwing Haiji out. His co-workers just stared and the younger one's face drained as the truth hit. Haiji didn't get banished for being useless, he got banished because he was insanely talented. Slipping back into the present, the master craftsman took a long, smoky drag from his pipe and muttered that the king must have had a secret reason for this whole setup. Then he caught himself. What if he'd banished Hagi on that first impulse without second thoughts? His words died out as his mind spiraled straight back to that day's memories. In a clearing just outside the city, Cruel glares at the world and thinks the country is finished, then whips around to Haiji, demanding why he's still here since she thought he'd be taking the day off. Haiji says he's got something he wants to try and Cruel lunges in instantly, offering to help. He stares at the rough forge he built with his own hands, then fixates on the S-ranked forge back in the capital, sure that this simple outdoor setup won't get thrown off by any secret magic it holds. She flips into a cruel grin, says keeping the temperature steady outside is a nightmare and asks for her help. Then she practically erupts with excitement, ready to jump in and assist. He wastes no time. Like he's done it 1,000 times, Haiji heads straight to the fire and Cruel effortlessly hoists a massive, heavy bucket of water straight into Quenkish's hands. A moment later, he bursts out that it's done, then raises the freshly forged kitchen knife and glares at it like it's priceless, stunned by how gorgeous it looks even though he made it in something as plain as that. He grips the brand new blade and heads for a giant tree stump, then freezes. Without appraisal, he can't tell if this thing is A-rank or S-rank just by sight alone, so he decides right then, it's time to put it to the test. With a sharp flick of his wrist, he hurls the knife, wham, and it buries itself deep in the stump as it splits and blasts out a blazing, powerful light. He clocks it instantly. It's the same trick as that sword from back then. As he locks eyes on that glowing blade, memories slam back. His royal forged sword got cleaved in two, just like the knife he forged outside, and now he's freaking out, wondering if this is the same Ray ending. He grips the newly forged knife, still stunned by what it could do, wondering what secret force is humming inside the royal forge. Then Cruel breaks in, smirking hard, and blurts out that his blade is insane for slicing a sword clean in half. Her bright praise gets snipped in an instant, her pointed ear twitches and she hears something far off. "Someone's here," she blurts, then she bolts into the woods, leaving a stunned Haji staring around like, who in the world could that be? In the blink of an eye, she erupts into her true draconic form, tears into the sky on roaring wingbeats and calls out that she'll go greet their guest. He watches her shrink into the sky until she's just a tiny speck, then, before the silence can settle, he spots someone trudging toward him on foot. A young woman wrecked with exhaustion and raw emotion, and he instantly knows who it is as he blurts her name. Right after that, they're ushered inside his place and Philnell grips a glass of water while she rushes out an apology. She says whatever just happened totally stunned her, so she bolted straight here without even thinking. She leans in and says she thinks she's the reason he's stuck, and Haiji can't help but stare at her with worry as Cruel, back in her humanoid form, stands beside the table. Cruel cuts Philnell off with a confident grin, brushing aside every worry, saying the Deletive forest is crawling with monsters with no guards in sight, and then she leans in to offer help, telling Philnell, "If you need a carriage, just call on me." This offer feels like it's finally dragging Philnell to the real reason she came. Her smile drops, her face goes stone cold, and she starts explaining the truth. Someone made a claim about the knife. Agi and Cruel lock eyes, stunned and wide-eyed, then burst out in disbelief, shouting a claim. Her shock instantly detonates into fury. She snaps her draconic eyes blazing and roars, "Haiji's knife is that good, so what could possibly be wrong with it?" He tries to calm her down, pushes Cruel to rein it in, then whips his anxious eyes back to the merchant. "Philnell, what's happening?" he demands. She pauses, then whispers, "It's too sharp." She launches into the tale. This knife was meant for the head chef of a client, but new cook secretly grabbed it instead, and in his rush he fumbled and the blade slipped right out of his grip. A blade came screaming down from above, And that's when she reveals the truly astonishing part. She says it was so razor-sharp that as it dropped, it almost took a chunk out of the new cook's foot. And when the knife slammed into the floor, the tip punched straight into the stone and stuck there. She finishes her story and in a flash crumples to the floor, bowing so deep her forehead kisses the wood. "Hey, I recognize your incredible skill," she blurts, her voice trembling with raw anguish like she can't stop thinking about every drop of effort it must have taken. He leans down to her bowed form and the sharpness in his face melts into understanding, because he knows what it means when a craftsman hears their work is unusable. He calls her out with empathy, telling her he gets the sting, the crushing pressure of that position. "Please, Phil Noel," he says softly, "raise your head." He stared her down with fresh resolve and declared it. He was going to forge a knife on purpose, then make it dull as could be. Hearing that, Philnell's eyes burned with tears as she choked out his name. Then he snapped that chasing a perfect edge was just a craftsman's ego, because the real point was remembering who would hold and use that tool in the end. She stared at the blade still warm in his grip, eyes wide with shock, and blurted, "There's no way this is an A-rank kitchen knife." He nodded, confirming, "That's exactly what I just forged." Filmo's appraisal stamped the knife as A-rank, while the blade he'd forged before was allegedly S-rank. Yet nobody could explain why it was so ridiculously perfect. Once the new design got the green light, he swore he'd start production right away, and Philnell practically grabbed his hand, nodding hard with full excitement for the plan. A few days later, the deal finally clicked shut. When it was over, Hoggy beamed and waved from the roadside as Philnell rode off, horse in tow, with cart packed tight and loaded with his goods. She burst back in with a grin so bright it felt like sunrise, telling him every last knife was completely sold out. Then he just stared, stunned, and demanded, "Are you serious?" She said the knives were flying off the shelves faster than she could restock, and her plan to hit the housewives had smashed it so hard that now she was drowning in customers, each one grabbing at her like, "I need one too." She lights up and tells Haiji the knives are top-notch, then dares him to stop acting so modest, saying the whole win is thanks to his marketing, while Haiji, clearly a bit overwhelmed, just cracks a nervous laugh. With a serious look on her face, she leans in and tells him the new orders already came in, then begs him to crank out 100 more knives for them. His face drains to bone white as the shock hits. *100. He blurts out, utterly stunned by how enormous that request is, then immediately calls her out, asking what she thinks humility means when she's the one stuck footing the bill for all the materials. The order's weight crashes down on him, and all he can muster is a strained, tired laugh. That night, a savage storm hits. Rain slams the forest floor and lightning tears open the dark sky. Caught in the middle of the storm, Cruel stands alone, drenched, furious, and unshakable, as she clenches her jaw and mutters to herself like she's bracing for impact. She pushes deeper into the rain-choked woods, eyes darting through the dark as her mind races. Where is her target hiding? Rain batters a tiny rustic cabin, streaming off the eaves, and inside a wooden bucket slowly swells as a leak in the ceiling keeps dripping, drip, drip. Inside, the hero stands in the chaos and stares at the rain hammering down, muttering that this roof leak can't keep haunting him and needs a real, permanent fix. A thunderous shout blasts right behind him, shattering his focus. He whips around in pure shock to see C, soaked to the bone, her face looming in a creepy, dark shadow. Her menacing stare crumbles into a mischievous grin and rainwater drips off her like she's trouble. She tilts her head and asks if she startled him. He let out a shaky sigh of relief, sweat dripping off his temple. While outside, Cruel grinned happily in the pouring rain as shattered roof planks crashed down, then told him it felt as refreshing as a cold bath and thanked him for the emergency fix. While she pats herself dry, a tiny sneeze escapes her. Then he whips his head around with worry, but she shuts it down fast, swearing that as a dragon she can't possibly catch a cold. It jerks away, cheeks blazing, clutching a cloth as he fights the urge to stare at her soaked clothes sticking to her back. Hoping to warm up the best way he can, he pitches making a meal, and right as a pot starts to simmer, Cruel's voice lights up with eager questions about what they're having for dinner. Inside their home, a huge pot of braised meat bubbles and simmers like pure comfort food. Haiji makes it clear it's the giant boar they just crushed. Right next to him, Cruel's eyes light up with hungry excitement, clocking how tender that meat looks and how the soup smells absolutely irresistible. She takes her first bite and instantly her face lights up like it just found heaven. It's so good, she gasps, swearing it's tender, sweet, and the most wonderful thing she's ever tasted in her entire life. Seated at the table, she throws her arms up in full celebration, swearing that every dish HG makes is absolutely delicious, while he just watches with a tiny smirk, wondering out loud if she says the same thing every single time she takes a bite of his cookies. Gaze drifts toward the last chunks of meat in the pot, dreaming that this would be 10 times better with some cock-coney seasoning, then grimaces when he realizes this world doesn't have mirin or soy sauce. He keeps racking his brain about what this place can actually cook, wondering if anyone even knows how to make dashi broth here, and then he hits the terrifying thought that a hero summoned before might have brought it all with them. So yeah, he decides it's time to grab a bite and find out. He stares at his empty bowl and those untouched chopsticks, and then a brutal realization hits him like a truck. He shoots Cruel a glare, she's still scarfing food like it's a feast, and fury bubbles up as he realizes she'll devour every last bite before he even gets a taste. Right as his chopsticks shoot toward the pot, Cruel's chopsticks whip in and steal the meat he'd been targeting. Then she snaps SHH, whirls on him with a razor glare and interrogates him like, "Were you trying to grab my share?" She and Haiji peek out from under their cover, jaws set tight as they scan the whole room. In the next moment, both of them snap their eyes wide, staring at the same shocking truth. Their alarm spikes when a mystery girl with cat ears suddenly pops out of nowhere, and now she's tearing into the food on their table like she owns the place. With a fierce, unblinking stare, she vows she won't let them escape. A second later, the girl hangs upside down, her eyes spinning from pure dizziness. Then she blurts out endless apologies, admitting she's the villain for stealing Haiji's horn. Tears brimming in her eyes, she keeps apologizing, insisting she was starving, but Cruel glares with sharp annoyance, snapping that you can't just grab what belongs to someone else just because your stomach's empty. Haiji softens his tone, clocking the girl's soaked clothes, and asks if she got caught in the rain. Sue, at least that's her name, admits she was out in the downpour hunting for something. Haiji brushes off her worries about the horn, telling her to drop it, and that only fuels the Cruel, never-ending displeasure. Kindness hits her like a tidal wave, and she fully collapses, tears pouring down her face as she pleads with Haiji, begging him to find her papa and mama. A little later, the trio takes their seats at the table. Soot dives into her meal with fresh energy, grinning and praising how amazing it tastes, while Haiji studies her and blurts out if this is proof she really is a lost kid. Sue digs into her food like it's pure fire, and with a grin she blurts that she's from the Divine Beast clan living in the Dalida forest, while Cruel stares her down, then sharpens it further, naming her as someone from the White Wolf tribe. She scoffs at the Divine Beast title, saying her own power blows it out of the water, while Haiji, stunned by what he's hearing, can only blurt out God in pure disbelief. That's why he's so confused. Dalida Forest isn't just a forest of spirits and divine beasts in name, because deep down, most of what lives there are demons wearing a monster's mask. The true divine beasts don't just live anywhere, they claim territory, and the White Wolf tribe Sue belongs to? They're the vagrants, always on the move, never staying put. They trek across that endless landscape, and one burning question hits them hard. Why in the world is the Dalida Forest, their so-called home, so gigantic? AG, still processing the info, blurts out if there are 200 of them in the capital. Cruel snaps back that this isn't some cute little situation, and when Sue overhears it, her face falls as memories hit her hard. She was warned she'd only be a burden. Her heartbreak snaps into pure defiance. No, this isn't some sad truth. She yells, small fists clenched like she's ready to fight the sky. Haiji asks if that means she got thrown out of her pack, and Cruelly Sober adds that once someone's gone, they never get to come back. The meaning hits Haiji like a gut punch. Sue has been permanently exiled. He stares at the small, determined girl in front of him, and their eyes lock, like they just shared a secret without saying a word. A jolt of memory slammed into Haiji's mind, an older man's harsh, disappointed stare burning in one breath. Then the next moment he's seeing his younger self turn his back on the royal court, ditching the king behind, and marching out with a heavy sack thumping over his shoulder. Cruel's voice cut through the haze, yanking him back to the present, and as his hand settled on her head, he murmured for her not to fear. Then he spun to the crying Sue, voice rock solid, he promised he'd be the one to track down her parents. Cruel stared them down, her face locked tight, like she couldn't decide whether to reject his choice or swallow it whole. With their new purpose blazing in their hearts, the crew kicked off their journey, leaving the safe road behind and charging straight into the wider world. Now locked in his armor, Hagi barreled through the forest with cruel trouble at his side, and Siu grinning like all that despair was just gone for good. Her brand new excitement sent her careening into a gnarled path, and Haiji snapped at her to calm down before she ended up getting herself hurt. She jerked herself upright and blurted out a dazzling thank you, but his words died in his throat, because the top of her dress suddenly slid down and his eyes widened as her shoulders bared, pinning her face in pure, mortified shock. Three of them trek through the forest when Cruel leans toward Haiji and warns him, "Don't spoil Sue too much." Haiji flashes a warm smile like he gets it, then softly reminds her Sue is still just a kid. She keeps her thoughts locked away, convinced Sue is a divine beast built with a naturally strict nature, so she's sure that spoiling the girl will only stunt her growth. Her words hit like a whisper in a storm. Hagi just smiles, calm as ever, and offers that placating shrug, and she finally snaps, flings her hands up, and demands, "Were you even listening?" That argument hits Sue like a shock. She blushes hard, and it finally clicks. Cruel didn't just mess around, he was genuinely worried about her. Haiji shoots a quick glance over his shoulder, and that knowing look tells it all. Cruel, scaled tail swishing back and forth like a dead giveaway that, no matter how harsh she sounds, she's not really hating the girl. Once she lands her point, Cruel rips the disguise away and reveals a stunning white dragon. Then she declares she'll fly over and scout the area, leaving the other two to wait right here for her return. Heiji and Sue huddle together, staring as the mighty dragon surges into the sky and vanishes into the far distance. While they wait, he drops onto a rock, pulls out a chunk of wood and his carving knife from his pack, and starts carving like there's no time to waste. He clocked it. Cruel still hadn't come back from her scouting run, so he snapped his gaze to his other partner and yelled, "Hey Sue, When she never replied, he glanced over and there she was, fast asleep in the grass. He couldn't help it. Surprise slipped out of him in a tiny gasp. She finally drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep, a soft smile curling on her lips. Then, while she murmured in her dreams about how quiet it all was, you could tell it was nothing like her usual non-stop life. As he watched her, a smile cracked across his face. He softly rubbed her head between those ears, and he couldn't believe he was acting just like a parent. He caught himself thinking, next time I'm making her something out of oak. From the shadowy depths of the forest, a pack of wolf-like monsters crashes into view, black fur bristling, teeth snapping in vicious snarls, and glowing eyes locked on prey as they surge forward. Their approach doesn't slip by unnoticed. Suskat's ears snap and twitch, swiveling fast as they lock onto the source of the danger closing in. A jolt of sudden alertness slams into Haiji, and she snaps a finger to her lips, shushing him with a look so tense it's scary. And the moment they both whip around toward the danger, Haiji instantly gets how serious this is. They huddle at the edge of a clearing, staring into the thick woods where those terrifying noises are crawling out, and the air turns heavy like something's about to spring. Pure terror rips across Sue's face as she realizes what's coming, and her fangs peek out while she trembles out the name, Ashu Hao. Processes her words and his face snaps hard, because he knows the Ashu hounds, those C-rank monsters, and he just clocked it. They're boxed in with no escape route in sight. Sue tilts her eyes to him, and the fear in her stare screams how bad this is. But he doesn't waste a second. He snaps into action, scoops the startled Sue into his arms, and declares, "We're running right now." He snaps into a pivot, then launches into a sprint, vanishing deeper into the forest, yelling about the luggage for half a breath, then immediately shuts that idea down and screams that he can grab it later, because right now their survival is the only thing that matters. He tore through the tall grass, boots pounding and splashing the wet earth as he drove his body past every limit. Right behind him, the Ashu hounds thundered onward, dark blurs tearing through the undergrowth, their paws keeping perfect pace. Even with the risk raging around them, Sue looked like she was loving every second. She burst out with a huge grin, bragging about how fast Hagi was running, while Hagi fought to keep going, jaw tight, thinking, sure, he might look like some old man, but he was still the former hero. Even as a fallen, rotten hero with nothing but weird little skills, that past still fueled his insane stamina. and he just had to grit his teeth and last a bit longer until they finally hit the blacksmith's forge. He spotted a tiny abandoned hut up ahead and a plan snapped into place. Those demonic beasts would come racing for the smell of fire, and if he baited them into that hut, maybe he'd finally have a shot. Right when he thought victory was finally in his hands, a savage growl ripped through the air from right behind him. One of the hounds exploded forward, scorching breath blasting his way as razor-sharp fangs snapped shut on its target in the blink of an eye. Attack slammed into him and he stumbled down to the ground. He jerked his head up trapped. Two beasts circled in tight, side by side, their glowing eyes burning with pure predatory hunger. He found himself boxed in with no escape and he could feel it. The beasts weren't just hunting, they were thinking. Then, right behind him, a tiny figure slipped into view, Sue, who grabbed the moment and ordered him, dead serious, to put her down. She slipped into place beside him, and together they squared up back to back, trapped in that menacing pack, asterisk clang asterisk, as a cold metallic ring snapped through the air and he bared his knife, ready for the inevitable clash. He snapped his eyes over the small girl, barking for her to stay back, then scanned the pack of hounds. There were way too many, and he knew guarding Sue while fending them off would be a brutal mountain to climb. But she didn't back down. Cat-eared girl surged forward and screamed a ferocious, defiant roar, her small face twisting with unexpected fire, and Haiji just froze, stunned by how fearless she was. Her courage hit him like a punch to the chest. He couldn't stop asking himself why he was even there while a tiny kid was swinging through it with that kind of fire. And in that exact moment he realized Sue was the real hero, not him. That truth slammed into him and hardened his resolve. If a man couldn't even shield one kid, he had no right to call himself a hero, not even as a decoy. Right as his mind snapped into place, one of the hounds shot forward and Sue met its charge head-on with a ferocious counter. Right before the beast could land a hit, a dark, whip-like appendage snapped out at blinding speed and slammed the attack aside in a violent streak. The hound got slammed into the dirt in a blink. A sharp salt cut the moment short. The rest of the pack snapped back in shock, and Haji's face tightened with grim satisfaction as he silently thought, all right. He stares at the last beasts, worry carving deep lines across his face, while the hounds don't even flinch, growls thunder through the air like nothing happened, and he fumes to himself, realizing his whole show of power scared absolutely nobody. Then his gaze snaps to a jagged outcrop above, where a massive, many-tailed beast looms and scans everything below, and he immediately knows that's the pack's leader. He gets it instantly, no choice left. He has to take down that leader or he's done for. His determination snaps into place the moment his eyes lock onto the target. Just as he's about to strike, a colossal shadow engulfs the clearing. Then a massive white dragon barrels out of the heavens, wings stretched wide, shaking everything with its thunderous landing. The dragon's ancient, earth-shaking roar booms through the forest, and it straight up questions the hounds for tormenting Haji and Sue. Relief hits Haji like lightning, his grin bursts wide as he spots the magnificent creature, then he roars, "Cruel!" while Sue just stares up, eyes huge with pure wonder. In response, the great dragon blasts out a devastating strike, scattering the eschew hounds like leaves in a violent storm. Haiji freezes in shock as the survivors whirl around and bolt, and a brand new dread slams into his mind. Their escape route runs straight past the subjugation grounds. Then his eyes snap back to the dragon, and there they are, calm as ever. Sue's white wolf tribe perched on her back while they loom over the defeated enemy. He watched as Sue faced the newcomers, her ears twitching with pure nerves. Before he could even blink, a male tribesman roared out with a brutal power and erased the last Asho hounds on the spot. He froze, stunned by the brutal strength he'd just witnessed, and the long-haired warrior calmly turned back to him, saying it looked like Hagi had been taking care of their suit. The warrior grinned and pointed to his crew, the White Wolf tribe. Then one of them stepped forward, thanked Haji from the heart for keeping the young girl safe. Just like that, his focus got ripped away. Cruel, now wearing a humanoid body, burst out of the trees and screamed his name, and all he could do was stammer hers in shock. She lunged into his arms, crushing him in a tight embrace, and her voice broke with pure relief, telling him she was just so happy he was safe, then apologizing for leaving him alone. Hot in the hog, Sue is pinned to Haji's chest, her cheeks burning crimson as the rest of the White Wolf tribe watches the reunion with amused grins. She finally loosened her grip. Cruel spun to Sue and blurted out a heartfelt thanks for saving Haji. Right there, a short-haired tribe woman stared them down and demanded to know loud and clear whether Sue was really the one who protected her. The reunion only happened because Krull moved like lightning. She shot high above, caught Sue's exact location from the sound of her cry, and instantly realized the kid was shielding. Back on the ground, all that doubt was instantly gone. The female tribe member who'd questioned everything lunged into a tight, grateful hug and started thanking her for her courage. After the hug ended, Sue looked down and realized she was clutching something small, and she didn't recognize it at all. With wide, curious eyes, she stared up at Haiji and blurted out what it was, like, "What did you just give me?" He told them Sue was a divine beast, an actual god bell, and the moment that truth hit, the White Wolf tribe practically erupted with awe. He kept talking, clearing it up. This wasn't a random thing, it was a cowbell. Then he promised her, straight up, "Wear it and you'll be protected," and the tribe's leader snapped his head in agreement. With the gift passed hand to hand, the moment to part finally hit, right when the White Wolf tribe's members burst into cheers, waving wildly and shouting their heartfelt goodbyes to Haji and Cruel. They sauntered off, then spun back to wave one last time, and behind us Sue's brand new bell chimed, bright, cheerful, and ringing into the distance. Later, in his brand new, peaceful home, Haiji whipped up a simple meal, cracked an egg into a bowl, and the thought hit him. That cruel woman, probably starving and knowing it. He's just sitting at the table when this furious, cruel woman explodes on him. She slams her hands down and demands to know what happened to her food. She rants that she was counting on what he grabbed in town, but her portion is gone, and she snaps that he ate it. He stays cool and flat out denies it, insisting it wasn't him. He insists that if she's going to throw blame his way, she'd better let him talk, because he's definitely not the culprit. Then they just stare, tension razor-thin, until a faint clatter snaps the moment, and on that boat it all clicks. Their eyes snap to the noise under the table. Sue pops out, licking her fingers clean like nothing happened, and Haiji blurts her name in pure, stunned disbelief. With a blissful grin and a little crumb still on her cheek, Sue tilts her head up, no shame at all, and cheerfully blurts that she's been separated from her group again. In the kingdom of Wiril, a brutal downpour batters the grand royal castle, smashing rain into its towering spires beneath a heavy, choking sky. From the hallway, the master craftsman stares out at the gloomy rain, frowning at the sky like it's a personal insult, then snaps, yelling at someone out of sight to hurry, stop the leak, and save their iron before it rusts. Somewhere else inside the castle, the royal minister is exploding with rage. He roars, demanding why a stain is creeping onto the pale blue ceiling, and he sees that the leak is wrecking a precious blue dye imported all the way from another country. He roars orders at the nearest servant, "Hurry up, stop that leak right now." Then the servant scrambles across the floor and slaps a wooden tub down to catch the dripping water. While the master blacksmith and his colleague rush to the master craftsman, they blurt out that the palace corridor is leaking again, and it's spreading too. The craftsman just stays calm, even as the furious royal minister storms off in the background. He takes a slow drag from his pipe, then nods like it's no big deal, because ever since Hiro Hagi showed up a couple years back, the leaks have vanished like magic. One blacksmith can't believe it, while the other points out how the roof tiles on their smithy are shaped differently, and says they're downright beautiful. The master craftsman flicks his hand and shouts that their break is done, urging them straight back to the smithy. As the bell clangs and the others stream out, he stares into the rain, quietly wondering what Haji is up to right now. Flanking a rustic wooden house, Cruel and Sue stride up to Haji, grinning like they've got secrets, and Cruel happily fires off, "So what's your plan today?" While Sue leans in right behind him, same question, bright-eyed and dying to know what they're about to do. Since the cottage has gotten painfully cramped, he decides to tear into renovations. He even sketches a simple floor plan, ready to knock down a few walls, stretch the rooms, and carve out brand new space for guests. But when Sue sees the draft, worry hits her fast. The White Wolf tribe has temporarily put her in his care, and she reminds him, those rooms won't just be for guests, the other children will need space too. Cruel digs in and says that, along with the house, they'll also retile the forge roof. Sue just stares, confused, and blurts out what retiling even means. He breaks it down step by step. These tiles are fired from clay and stacked in layers to shrug off scorching heat, so the roof stays cool in summer and traps warmth in winter, giving him that steady temperature he's craving for every single workday. Cruel remarks land like knives, saying his description sounds exactly like her own scales, yet Haiji doesn't back down. He jumps on the comparison, eyes lighting up, and declares they're heading straight for the mountains to hunt for clay. Both Cruel and Suture nod hard, fueled by the same wild enthusiasm. Moments later, in a rocky patch of forest, Haiji slams a shovel straight into the earth and hits a rich seam, while Sue stands right beside him, grinning proudly with a huge, freshly dug chunk of clay. She stops his digging mid-scratch and watches Sue march right up to Cruel, who's fully in her massive white dragon form. Sue holds out the clay and the dragon smoothly snatches it, then slides it into a giant wooden crate strapped to her back, locked and ready to haul away. Back at their homestead, Hoggy kicks into action, demanding a huge heap of damp clay and stomping into it with his bare feet, while Sue watches the steady rhythm, murmuring his name like she's calling the plan into existence. She leans in over a tiny clay figurine of cruelty, presents it with a dramatic flourish, and he can't help it. He stares, impressed at how damn good it looks, wondering if she's hiding real artistic talent. Then he turns to Sue and tells her she can help too. He then jabs a finger at a giant wooden contraption in the workshop and fires off a question to Haiji, what the cannon S for, then quickly explains, "Relax, it's not a weapon, it's an extruder machine." He starts explaining how it works, telling them to drop the clay in the top opening first. Then once the molding plate is set, Haiji, Cruel, and Sue all slam down the big lever together, pushing the clay out into a long, perfectly even shape. As the extruded clay hits the table, Cruel cheers erupt. She really made it. Haige leans in and explains the secret: slam the force straight down when you push. Then he grins and says the next move is to slice the slab. He shows them exactly how to drag a wire through that giant lump of clay, cutting it into neat little tiles, while Krull and Sue stare, eyes locked on every move. Then he explains the hard truth: once the tiles are cut, they've got to sit and dry for days, and since they'll still need a real kiln to fire, he pushes them to build a simple one outside. Cruel and Sue don't hesitate, they jump at the idea. Following his orders, the two girls dig a pit kiln with unstoppable energy, and HG sketches the whole design in motion. By linking two underground holes, fresh oxygen can flow through, keeping the flames blazing hot for the firing. Once the kiln's ready, the real finale kicks off. Those dry tiles get dipped in glaze, then you slot them inside the firing pit, one careful piece at a time. Inside the pit kiln, the tiles blaze under intense heat, because every single one has to be dipped in glaze, then fired slow and steady, or the shock of that temperature drop will split them wide open. And boom, total victory. Haiji, surrounded by roaring cheers and with Cruel and Sue at his side, lifts a flawless tile and declares, loud and proud, "It's done." You lift the tile for them to get a clear look, telling them how the glaze makes it shine like glass and sends water and dirt sliding off, and Sue can't stop staring at how smooth and glossy it is. Then, with everything in hand, Haiji declares it's time to lay the tiles on the roof, and the whole crew answers with one loud, fired-up cheer. Their excitement crackles as they thrust their fists into the air, ready to kick off the next phase of construction. Their victory celebration gets ripped apart when Haji climbs onto the brand new roof. He snaps that it's too soon to celebrate until they've hunted down every leak. Cruel doesn't wait a second. He unleashes a brutal torrent of water, soaking the roof and leaving the shocked Haji flailing. He braces on the slippery roof, wipes water off his face, and mutters that he almost ate the ground. Sue fires back from below, asking if anything's leaking. Cruel, acting like he's worried, asks if he's okay, and he shoots back fast that he's totally fine. His reassurance gets swallowed by a triumphant shout from the rooftop. The test is a pass. Down below, Cruel and Sue burst into joyous cheers, celebrating their win. With the roof finally sealed, Haiji whips his focus to the next phase of the forge's makeover, hammer in hand as he works. Then the master craftsman steps in and hits him with the truth. Back when Haiji was just a decorative hero, his job wasn't only punching monsters, he'd been the one covering for shortages too. And now the master points him straight at the real work, tile making. "Get to it," he says. He's slaving over a fresh glaze, his mind drifting back to those old, classy red tiles, pretty to look at, but they cracked like nothing. So he's stuck constantly mixing new glaze just to keep up with the endless repairs they keep sending him. Right as his thoughts kick off, the master craftsman erupts, screaming that the royal minister is a full-on fool, telling a worried Haji, "I already warned them the forge roof was totally wrecked. But that minister never even came to see the hero, and now those old tiles are getting crushed under years of neglect. Later outside, he yells for Krull to bring him a pot, and she, along with the curious Sue, watches as Krull demands what he's planning, and he grins and tells her, "Don't peek." His hard work pays off with a pot brimming with perfectly cooked potatoes, and the air fills with that mouth-watering aroma as someone blurts out, "Those look insanely delicious." Krull and Sue couldn't wait to dig in, but he stopped them cold and demanded they hold up for just one more moment. Then he pulls out a tiny container and asks, like it's a secret gift, whether they'd rather make the potatoes way tastier, only to reveal the horse butter inside and explain his plan to slice straight into the top of each potato, leaving Sue and Krull completely baffled. He slaps a slice of butter onto a sizzling hot potato, watches it melt in real time, then hypes it as the best way to eat it and dares everyone to watch closely. Krull and Sue bite down right after him, and that rich flavor hits like lightning, so intense it freezes them both in stunned, pure bliss. She and Sue shove down the potatoes like there's no tomorrow, stuffing their faces, while Haiji practically roars at them to slow up, because that butter is a painfully expensive treasure. With their hunger finally crushed, Sue grins and calls it a sweet reward for all that work. While back in the kitchen, Heiji watches closely and notes that butter is basically a luxury here, but they still somehow have a little left. A few days later, he's standing in the woods, axe hanging over his shoulder, scans for the perfect tree, then throws his whole body into one brutal swing. But right when the blade is about to fall, a blinding flash erupts from the tree trunk, so violent it hurls him backward onto the dirt, and he yells in shock, demanding to know where that light came from. Krull and Sue bolt in the second he moves, sprinting to his side. Krull snarls, demanding why he tried hacking the doll off that tree, while Sue yells that he's about to get dragged and scolded for what he just did. She fires back, asking if he's really dead set on getting punished for chopping down the tree. Still barely standing, he shoots back, "Who's gonna punish me?" And then it clicks, Dalada, the very name of this forest. Krull leans in and tells Sue that Dalada is the forest's great god, and chop down a tree without permission and you'll feel his wrath. Sue shakes with terror, whispering that an enraged Dalada is worse than even her own father. He demanded what kind of scary she meant, yet she kept her gaze averted with that grim look. Meanwhile, he just coldly declared, "For me, it's the absolute worst." When that dire warning hits, Sue's face turns deathly pale and she starts trembling, because the idea of being erased from the world for good is more than her heart can handle. She explains that Dalada's half-body sometimes slips into the forest, and Haiji, still reeling, demands to know if this is new, because he can't wrap his head around why chopping down just one tree would unleash that kind of divine power. She goes on, telling him that when things get like this, you've got to make an offering to Dalada right there at the foot of the tree, while Haiji watches, completely lost, and suddenly the weirdest thought hits him. He just wants to eat something. Then it hits him, he wants a potato with butter. He blurts out an apology, says he's already chopped up all the butter, and right in the middle of everything he stops cold, staring like, "Why am I even thinking about this right now?" His wild declaration slams the brakes on both Krull and Sue, because they're left staring at him, eyes blazing and mouths shut, stunned that he still has butter and that it's his top priority. Even though it's totally ridiculous, they still lay one plain potato, piled high with a buttery cloud, right at the great tree's roots like it's sacred. Just moments later, a warm glow bursts from the offering, and Sue instantly feels the shift in the air, then chirps with joy because Dalada absolutely loved the meal. Haiji stares at the light, realizing he can't waste a second. The wood he just cut now has to be handled with total care. With the forest gods finally appeased, the whole group erupts into a victory feast, cheers flying. Haiji lifts his cup and declares that thanks to the wood they managed to get safely, their room renovation is finally done. At the edge of the woods, a mysterious woman with short, light hair slips out from behind a tree and stares hard, dark armor hugging her frame, a sword resting at her hip as her eyes lock onto a lone wooden house far off. She knows it. Her mind clicks clear as day, so that's the house. In a roaring tavern, the armored hero Haiji lets out a panicked shout as he gets slammed onto the floor, then snaps his gaze upward in pure shock, because towering over him is a ruthless elf swordswoman with light hair and dark skin, standing there like she owns the place, her hand resting calmly on her blade. Haiji bares his teeth, stunned, and can't stop wondering who in the world she is. The scene snaps forward and the elf swordswoman stands before a roaring crowd of patrons, cool as ice as she declares her blade won't be used to cut down mere weaklings. Then the young merchant Philnell steps in with a grin, praises her amazing performance and sweeps in a free drink, telling her to order anything she wants. Elinor shoots out a nervous explanation. She didn't make that gorgeous kitchen knife the elf is staring at, while her own reflection blurs across the blade's shine and she quietly can't stop wondering who in the world forged something that perfect. As she keeps talking, Philno lights up and gushes over the blade, insisting it's a wicked good knife she snagged from a traveling merchant. Then her voice fades as her hands gesture like she realizes the elf's attention has already slipped away. The elf swordswoman snapped her gaze back and strode straight for the exit, no more words, no explanations. As she slipped out, the tavern went quiet for half a breath, then erupted into whispers, dark elf swordswoman and her name, Belfair. Out in the open, Belfair, the warrior who commands purple lightning, halts in a dead stop, her face impossible to read as she stands alone and stares down the whole town. The scene shifts to a rustic workshop. Haiji, dressed as a blacksmith, hammers away at a tiny anvil, while a cruel inner humanoid form slams its hammer onto a piece of glowing metal, and the clang of their relentless work booms through the small smithy. A bright, cheerful elf apprentice suddenly pops up in front of Hage, grinning like she's bursting with pride, and thrusts a big, freshly forged knife at him while her sparkling eyes beg for his honest opinion. She leans in, heart hammering, as Hagi takes that kitchen knife she forged and studies it up close, lifting the blade to check its edge, his face locked tight while he mutters, "Let's see." After a beat of careful thinking, he calls it well made, and the elf apprentice instantly throws her arms up, screaming in pure triumph. AG watches and thinks, yeah, her fearlessness in the forge heat is legit. She's going to become an incredible blacksmith. While the apprentice is celebrating, Cruel suddenly storms in, eyes gleaming as she praises the young elf's solid muscle tone. Then she turns straight to Haiji and says it's his skills as a master craftsman that made the apprentice's success possible. She even mentions how wild it is to see him forging a plain kitchen knife, and for some reason that hits Haiji hard, leaving him flustered. He stays silent and a blush crawls across his face while the elf apprentice slides in close with a wicked grin and demands, "So why are you blushing?" Hagi clamps a hand over his mouth, swears he's not, and admits he's never been complimented like that before. She bursts into hearty laughter at how awkward his reaction is, then playfully pats his head like, "Thanks, Cruel," as if she's the one who made this moment happen. Later, Haji and Cruel settle in at the table when Sue suddenly barges in, cat ears up, eyes blazing, as she cheers that she's whipped up some seriously awesome food for them. She slaps down a huge platter stuffed with rice balls, eyes gleaming as she asks, "What's in these?" But Sue just pushes her forward and insists, "Eat." Haiji takes a bite and her eyes instantly sparkle. She blurts out that it's a boiled egg and raves that the seasoning is perfect. Watching her react, Haiji grabs one too, takes a bite, and a pleasant surprise flashes across his face. He bit into the rice ball and his face instantly twisted because that flavor hit him like a sour bomb. He blurted out, "What is this?" while Sue flashed those wide fangy teeth and practically begged him to say if he liked the wild strawberry she'd used. He snapped himself together and admitted the flavor was wild, maybe not for everyone, but he loved it. And when Sue heard that, her face lit up as she swore she'd cook him even more. After they crushed their meal, Haiji slammed down the last bite and shouted that it was back to work. Then Krull and Sue exploded with hype, raising their fists and cheering in perfect sync. Several days later, the forge came alive with the sharp, rhythmic clang of a hammer on steel as Hagi and his elf apprentice threw themselves into the work. The apprentice grinned at her brand new knife and spun her Haji into a bold business pitch. Why stop at knives when they could churn out a whole mountain of swords too? He watched in silence, but you could tell he was buying every word because her sword craftsmanship was seriously on point. Right as his mind was about to drift, a louder problem snapped his attention. Filma was late for her delivery. He blurted it out and the apprentice jumped at the chance to go check. Then Sue suddenly popped up from behind the stack of finished blades, beaming that she'd helped forge a full 100 knives and thanking Cruel like she'd just saved the day. He spun away, drowning in thoughts, sure as steel that every sword hammered in his workshop would sell without a hitch. The apprentice begged for his nod, and once she heard his certainty, she jumped in just as boldly as Sue, chiming, echoing the same confident promises. Then *SHHK*, a door slid open and everyone snapped their heads toward it because a horse and cart had just pulled up. Larsa, visibly flustered, hurried into place and bowed hard as she blurted out apologies for keeping them waiting. She blurts out that she never meant to sound unreasonable, she was just trying to guide the person who wanted to meet him. Haiji freezes, stunned, and asks the big question, is he really the guy they're talking about? Right as he's processing it, the elf apprentice strides forward, eyes locked on the stranger riding with Felnel, and she snaps, demanding to know who the woman really is. But the armored elf swordswoman stays ice calm, telling the apprentice not to take it out on the merchant. Then she steps forward and formally declares herself Fambian Belfair, but tells Haji to just call her Belle, and he blurts out her full name again, scrambling to fit every syllable into his brain. The moment someone brings up a nickname, Kuro cruelly mumbles that she hates her own name because it's got zero cuteness, while Sue, the young cat-eared girl, shakes with terror and clings to Haji's leg, begging him to shield her from these strangers. Her fear only seems to snag Belfair's attention. Then the sword-wielding woman's eyes blaze as she swears she's never seen a white wolf child. And before Sue can even react, she suddenly lunges in and traps her with a crushing, impossible-to-break hug, blabbing that she wants to take the child home. Sue thrashes in desperate panic, muffled cries spilling through her struggle, but Belfair clamps down on her tight. The elf then casually praises the girl's fierce, impressive muscles for her tribe, until Sue's fear hits hard and the apprentice barrels in shouting for Belfair to stop, insisting she's clearly terrorizing the child. Hagi throws himself into the plea, shouting at a Belfair to let the girl go, while Sue thrashes in that deadly grip and begs, "Hagi, save me." With the apprentice and Sue both visibly shaken, Haji strides up and snaps that she needs to stop right now. Belfair finally lets the girl go, tosses out a half-hearted apology, and admits she can't help it when it comes to cute things. Then her attention whips straight to Haji. She says Filmel told her about his knife skills, and now she wants to get a close look at the sword he's holding to test the quality of his craftsmanship. She thrusts the sword up high, her sharp eyes running the blade like a hunter, and with a blunt, critical stare, she declared the chasing on it just wasn't good enough. He nodded and admitted she was right, saying the polish was left rough on purpose, because a true swordsman would feel that tiny snag while cutting through an arm, and that slip was the point, built deliberately, not something you'd find on a blade made for a professional. Then she ripped her own weapon free and thrust the hilt into his hands. "Try this one," she said, daring him to inspect it. He snatched the sword from her, and the instant his fingers wrapped the hilt, a sharp click rang out, freezing him in total, stunned disbelief. From afar, his companions stare as sweat beads pop up on his brow, and his whole body goes stone still. Two girls watched, dread creeping in by the second. One kept waving off and demanding to know why Haji's face had gone bone-white, while Sue hovered beside him, frantically checking if he was okay. He trembled, couldn't look anyone in the eye, and with his head bowed, he blurted out a sincere apology, admitting he was probably the one who forged that sword, and now it was broken. Belfair's eyes widened at his words, and the only thing he could blurt out was, "Are you really confessing you're green at this?" Haiji's gut twisted with anguish, because deep down he knew it was true. His own immaturity had been hammered into steel by the fire. He stood there in dead silence while his companions stared, as Belfair studied the fractured blade up close. She admitted it was flawed, sure, but it was still a damn fine sword, one that had fought monstrous foes for 3 years, and one truth she couldn't dodge: even the greatest blades are doomed to crack someday. Her calm acceptance hit him like a punch, and for a second he just froze. Then he remembered how he'd judged her as a monster for her insane strength and cool composure, and he hurried to ask her to forget his outburst. She just flashed him a soft smile and made it crystal clear: no matter what happened, his swords were still great. That praise lit Filnel up with pure excitement. She couldn't believe he'd actually earned the famed purple lightning Spellfair's approval. But Hagi just froze, stunned out of his mind, because he couldn't wrap his head around the fact that a legend like him had been using one of his own creations. His disbelief sparked the elf swordswoman's straight-up challenge. She demanded to know, plain and simple, if he hadn't forged her blade, and all he could do was freeze with wide eyes gaping as he murmured her name in stunned shock. She warned him not to freak out, telling him she'd been sharpening her life with his fine blades for ages, then straightened up and slid in a request, right after she got that bit cleared up. As she spoke, she whipped out a brand new, flawless sword and announced that in the whole Wurail kingdom no swordsmith could match him. Even if she wasn't 100% sure, she swore the blade she was unveiling him now was the one. The moment it appeared, it turned out to be the kingdom's latest, state-of-the-art forge model, fresh off the forges for the very first time. He blurted out a shout of disbelief, demanding to know if she was lying and whether that sword was really the one she claimed. Belfair didn't flinch, she just said that if he believed it was, then it must be. He jerks his gaze away, cheeks burning because that flash of the sword's dazzling creation slams into his head, then Belfair reveals she'd already figured it out. The blade was none other than that world-famous work from the Royal Kingdom. Haiji mutters under his breath and the truth clicks with a jolt. Turns out it was obvious back then too. She slams into his thoughts and jabs the sword toward his chest, eyes locked on him. This is exactly why I'm asking. Forge me a sword and make it just for me. As she talks, one lone tear slips out of her left eye and races down her cheek, while her stare stays locked, sharp, and unshakable. His eyes snap straight to the tear and he points immediately, face tight with worry as he asks, "Where's her edge?" She reaches up and gently taps the side of her face, then the secret clicks in. That eye is a prosthetic she got when she was still a kid. He lets that truth hit him and his face tightens instantly. He says straight up, this world isn't peaceful like Japan, it's a place where beasts and demons stalk the streets and you don't survive without fighting. He realizes that if her blade snaps, she's done for, and he presses, "So you're saying that's what you mean?" He turns away just a little, resolve rock solid, and says it straight. He doesn't forge weapons to kill people. Then Belfair's face crumples into deep, crushing sadness. Her sadness fades fast and a bright, determined smile bursts across her face. She says she wants a sword to protect him. Haiji freezes, totally stunned, as she reaches out and extends her hand. Then he thanks her and with fresh resolve grips her armored hand firmly, sealing the deal for good. With his cruel companions looming nearby and Sue staring from the forge doorway, Haiji cinches a headband tight around his forehead, realizing a real Japanese sword won't be done anytime soon. It'll take 10 long days, minimum, far beyond a simple knife. After sending Belfair back to the city, he steels himself for the brutal wait ahead. His eyes narrow with razor-sharp determination, and right then, he's ready to start. He points at a heap of jagged, dark metal and fires off a question to the master blacksmith. And the craftsman leans in to say it's Tamahagen, heavily refined steel, then explains that forging a knife from it demands 1500 to 1600 degrees, almost twice the usual heat. And Cruel and Sue hang on every word, hooked by the mystery. This cruel woman puffs out her chest and swears high-temperature work is her turf, telling him to trust her, so he can't stand being left out and jumps in instantly, eager to help with the cleaning. With his companion standing by, Haji drops to one knee across from the master blacksmith and they start pounding a blazing chunk of metal. Every strike hits on rhythm and sparks explode through the workshop. When the master blacksmith scoops up the cooled, lumpy mess from their first swings, he calls the whole ritual Tamaroshi. Then he hurls the metal right back into the furnace until it burns to a blazing white, ready to be hammered. Then the instructions keep rolling. This flattened steel has to be shattered into pieces. The best bits get picked, piled up and wrapped tight in paper, and that whole bundle gets dunked in a sticky slurry of straw, ash, and clay water before it's shoved back into the furnace for round 2 of heating. The same steel block gets hammered flat, folded over, and hammered again, over and over, until the metal's purity skyrockets while they carefully dust on more straw ash each time before diving it back into the roaring fire. He wipes the sweat off his brow, the forge's brutal heat turning him into a shining glare, and beside him those cruel mirrors keep their pressure on too. She smirks with pure focus, ready to swing again. With a furious cry, she smashes the heavy sledgehammer down onto the glowing steel he's gripping tight. Boom! The impact blasts through the whole workshop. He lays out cruel remarks for a moment, like crafting human weapons is pure agony. Then the blacksmith nods, saying Japanese swords are even worse because you have to layer and forge the metal again and again, countless times. Her curiosity hit its breaking point. She spins toward him and demands to know why he was so dead set against forging a sword for Haiji right before. He stares into the forge flames and flips the question right back on her, asking if she's jealous that he's the one forging the weapon. Cruel snaps it away fast, swearing she doesn't care a bit. Meanwhile, Haiji trains somewhere else, snapping through his form with a wooden sword and brimming with the itch to see how strong he's become. Then his eyes lock onto a rapier, the very one he forged for Belfair, and he can't stop thinking, What kind of blade can he craft now with his own two hands? At the forge, the master blacksmith finally drops the truth. This forge isn't just iron and fire, it holds a strange, powerful secret, and he's convinced that if they join forces, they can forge an absolutely legendary sword. His face snaps alive with wild, near-manic joy, and he blurts that this is the best time he's ever had. His love for the craft has come roaring back, blazing hot. Forging feels like pure celebration to him. He froze in stunned silence because his hard work was finally done, and the forge, now quiet, proudly showed off the blade he'd forged. Right beside him, Cruel and Sue stared at it with the same jaw-dropped disbelief. Sitting there on the stand right in front of them was the fruit of all their hard work, and the thought hit like lightning. It was finally done. That blade was pure perfection. Its polished steel blazed under the light, so Cruel snapped, "This is incredible," and Sue nodded right beside him, whispering, "It's beautiful." Her awe snapped into raw curiosity, and Cruel pushed the idea that Haiji should try a test cut. Sue jumped on it instantly. Heeding their advice, Haiji spots the perfect target out in the open, stands planted in front of a massive tree, gripping his fresh blade with raw intent, while Sausch yells encouragement from a safe distance. He swung the blade and a jolt of shock hit him instantly. It was impossibly light. The giant tree started to fall with a deafening crash, and Cruel blurted his name in panic. The slash hit hard and the weapon felt way too light in the next second, so he got knocked flat onto the grass. Cruel and Sue bolted to his side, firing off worried questions as he groaned through the pain. He locked eyes with the new katana and a bead of sweat slid down his temple. Then it hit him, wild with awe, he really had forged an unbelievable weapon. A few days later, the elf swordswoman Belfair finally met him and his crew, flashing a knowing grin, and then she admitted she'd been waiting on him for ages. "Sorry for the wait," Belfair said, then just smirked. His latest work looked rock solid to him. Haiji nodded right away, no doubts at all, and then straight up invited her to check it out immediately. She slipped in right behind him, and there it was, a katana sitting on a display stand. When Belfair reached for the blade, her face snapped into stunned disbelief at the power she could feel. Vilna Larsa shot up, startled by the reaction, saying that without a real appraisal, its rank was anyone's guess. Belfair shot back, breathless, insisting it was top tier, stammering, "It's definitely a rank," then catching himself like it could even be S rank. She kept the blade steady in her hands, and right then she realized it was way heavier than she'd ever imagined. But when she let a practice swing fly, it suddenly felt weirdly light in her hands, like it was almost too easy. Then her grin burst wide as she spun toward Hagi and asked if he wanted to watch a test cut, and he practically jumped at the chance. Belfair planted herself in front of a mountain of iron ingots as thick as a person's torso, and Haiji stared, convinced it should be impossible to cut through. But once her skill met his blade and she drove the swing forward with a sharp exhale, the impossible started to happen. They snapped the blade downward in one sharp, spotless swing, driving straight for the whole stack of iron ingots. The katana sliced through the metal like it was nothing, one effortless swing, and the whole stacked blade just split clean in two. Impossible feats left Cruel, Filmal, and Sue utterly stunned, their mouths gaping with shared disbelief. Haiji stared in stunned silence at the raw power his own creation unleashed, and then Belfair turned to him, her gaze shining with real admiration as she praised his skill. She kept that soft blush on her cheeks and smiled, saying the sword wasn't just steel, it was proof of his strength. Belfair admitted she'd been pulling her punches in their duel, and the moment the truth hit, she feared that if he'd really swung with everything, he could have ended it and cut her down. She dipped into a deep, respectful bow and thanked him like it meant everything. Then Haiji just stood there, still stunned by her words and the sword's power, swallowing hard as he tried to find something to say. Watching the whole exchange unfold, the master blacksmith cut in, his voice booming with pride. Then he told them this. Sure, every sword eventually snaps, but he refused their payment because this mess all started with the blade he forged failing in the first place. She demanded Belfair hand the money back, but Filnell cut in fast, reminding the swordswoman of her own rule, never leave a job hanging. That hit home, and Belfair snapped back into action, taking the point and offering 30 gold coins for the materials instead. She swats away the offered payment like it's insulting, saying the price is way too low because even the simplest things from the royal palace cost a full 100 gold coins. With a hard, steady stare, she demands what he thinks his work is worth. Haiji, gripping that gleaming katana, snaps back that he only priced the materials. His effortless brush-off of his own work leaves her reeling for a second, and she blurts out that she can't believe he's really trying to charge her, until his eyes catch hers and he fires back, asking if she's mad at him. She won't answer, her face gives nothing away. Then he steps in with a straight, serious request, begging Belfair to teach him the art of the sword. His request drags them into an open field right where Cruel and Sue are waiting, and he flat-out tells them he handed the Kaguchi blade to Belfair because his real goal is one thing: getting strong enough to protect his family. He keeps talking, convinced that surviving and getting stronger in that forest means he can master swordsmanship too. Then, as he finishes his point, Belfair slips a few steps away from the group. She whips around to face him with a teasing little smile and declares, "Mock battle, right now!" That sets Hagi reeling, but when he stalls, Belfair laughs, insists she's got it, and orders them to start immediately, only for Hagi to blurt that he's a total beginner. Her face hardens again as she admits it's the real fight that reveals what proper form is worth, not the theory. She snaps into a ready stance with her katana, tells him not to worry because he can't bring his full strength online from the start, and Haiji lets out a long sigh, accepting the sudden lesson. A faint, knowing smile tugged at her lips as she looked him in the eye, and then her voice dropped low and steady as she began. With that settled, a training session is about to kick off in a wide, grassy clearing beside a plain building. Haiji stands face to face with the elf swordswoman, Belfair, while Cruel watches closely and Sue and Film keep their distance from safety. All three of them brace for what's next. Belfair holds her sword like she's done it 1,000 times, Hagi clutches his weapon with pure resolve, and Cruel stays perfectly still, eyes sharp and ready for anything. From the sidelines, their cheers crack the air. Sue winks bright, Filnal grins with heart, and both throw their fists up, shouting for Hagi to go all out. In the heart of the clearing, Belfair stares him down with a smug, confident smirk, while Haiji looks rock-stiff, sweat beading on his brow as he tightens his grip on his sword. She snaps the silence, straight up asking if he'd rather be the attacker or the one holding the line. AG looks thrown off, but she doesn't stop, reading his reactions like clues and declaring he leans defensive. Then, his face lights up with shock at how right she seems. She's grabbing it back, but she shrugs it off, saying his body just moved on its own. That answer satisfies her, and now she's done talking, she's starting her attack. His eyes flare wide with panic as she rockets forward. Steel whistles as Hagi snaps into defense, catching a crushing strike with a brutal parry, shearing blade against blade. The hit is so heavy it shakes his bones, and that cold killing intent prickles him as he wonders if he's even reacting because his hero's growth skill finally kicked in. Even with the pressure crushing down, Belfair says he's starting to get the hang of the pace, then she flashes that sly grin and tells them to crank it up a notch. AG's face twists with pure panic as he blurts out protests, begging her to slow down and wait. The impact slammed into him and his grip clenched harder on his sword, because her attack hit with a whole other kind of speed and weight, and down from below, Belfair's voice snapped in, praising that he'd actually managed to take the strike. Even with his struggle roaring in his chest, she dug in and pressed her advantage, eyes locked, gaze sharp, refusing to blink, and she taunted him, daring him to prove he could still keep going. That crushing force slammed into him, and with a grimace he knew it, if it kept coming, it would shove him back and cut him down before he even got a chance to act. He knew he couldn't last, so his eyes snapped around, hunting for a crack in her defense, because he had to read her every move and strike on the exact beat. His gaze slid from her right knee to her left, and he was already setting up the next hit. Sensing his moment, he lunged in with a silent shout and slammed into her, grabbing her tight around the waist. That tackle landed clean, but it didn't rattle her one bit. She stayed calm, stared down at him, and said that on a battlefield, dropping your opponent is only the start of the fight. In the blink of an eye, everything flipped. He was suddenly slammed to the ground, the cold edge of her dagger pressed to his throat. "Stop!" he blurted, throwing in the towel. Belfair grinned and praised his moves right up to that tackle for how cleanly he handled it. When they finally stood face to face again, Hagi looked completely stunned. He blurted that he'd actually expected her to show him zero mercy when she pushed him down, then went on to wonder out loud if every dark elf was like that. Belfair just smiled, warm and steady, and told him, no, definitely not. He erupts in a frustrated shout, flings his hands into the air and collapses on the ground, finally beaten. Sue and Cruel watch from the sidelines and are blown away. Sue gushes that Haiji is a sword genius who looks insanely cool, and Cruel jumps right in with an excited yeah, while Philonel just quietly clocks that he's only mirroring Belfair's moves. Cruel remarks snap through the air, yet she insists it's still an amazing sight even if she can't spot the final move. Then Haiji hauls himself back up and Belfair leans in, asking whether he finally understands that they're crossing swords now. Now stripped of his armor, Haiji can only freeze in stunned silence, sweat pouring down his face as the crushing defeat finally sinks in. Cruel cuts in and tells him straight from the start she knew he's stronger than he thinks, because regular people can't even come within reach of her, the holy dragon. Belfair cuts in and says that Delita's dragon-level aura is so brutal it can smash a normal person's nerve before they even get close. Then she adds straight up that Haiji's strength is practically on par with an A-rank swordsman. The assessment crushes him into total silence. He stares at his own hand and doubts slam straight into his mind. Can I really earn that rank? She tells him the truth, he can't break through because he's been strangling his own potential the whole time. Then she holds out a sword still in its sheath and dares him to believe in himself. Haiji freezes, staring at the weapon as her words thunder in his head. He stared back at his past, when he was just a regular salaryman in modern Japan, and remembered how he got yanked into this world as a so-called decorative hero, always thinking his power was nothing, just following orders without a single doubt. But while he stood there, Cruel, Philonel, and Sue watched with soft faces, and Cruel cut in fast, swearing his own self-assessment was totally wrong. With his resolve snapping into place, he tightened his grip on the sword at his side and swore he'd try to believe in himself just a bit more. Belfair snapped back that it wasn't about trying at all. Then she sidestepped the whole argument and grilled him about the name of the blade he was holding, telling him to own it and trust himself with a masterpiece like that. He jabbed a finger at the sky and with total new certainty declared that he'd already picked the name. Belfair stared at him and surprise flickered across her face. He christened the sword Sukkyu, Azure Sky, because it promised endless power stretching outward like the sky above, and when Belfair saw it, he grinned and said the name fit perfectly for his brand new blade. Then his gaze locked onto Belfair and he blurted out that her blue eyes looked just like the sky that day, so the compliment hit her like a shockwave, and her eyes went wide before she could even react. She suddenly started to shake, face burning with embarrassment, and snapped that she just couldn't handle it anymore, while Haiji stood there utterly baffled, blurting, "What's wrong?" Choked with emotion, she snaps into a sudden hug, pressing Haiji close and burying his face in her chest as she blurts out how insanely cool he is, while Haiji freezes, totally blindsided, trying to make sense of it all. He freezes in disbelief, staring at her like, "Wait, are you really talking about me?" Then she lights up and nods hard, saying he's exactly her type, cool, kind, and ridiculously strong. And right there she admits she's been hunting for someone like him for ages. Her cheeks burned red and her breath hitched with pure excitement as she locked eyes with him and demanded to know if he'd be her partner. The moment shatters when Cruel lunges in and yanks Haiji away from the elf, and the furious woman snaps, demanding Belfair give him back, because Haiji is her master. An intense rivalry sparks between them. Belfair and Cruel lock eyes, and the air snaps with tension like electricity. Right as the two square up, Sue lunges in and calls Cruel out as a sly one, only for Belfair to stay cool and hit back that if that's true, then Sue must be Haiji's sword master. Cruel fires back just as sharp, claiming she's actually Haji's partner. As the argument spirals out of control, Philonel whips around to the stunned Haji and quips that everything's gotten wild so fast, while Haji just gapes, totally crushed by what's happening. As their bickering spits through the air, he jerks his gaze to the sky and can't help but wonder what the heck happened to his life. Now that the rivalry was out in the open, Belfair's exit was coming fast. She leaned out of her shaking carriage, flashed a bold grin, and promised she'd make sure she'd take good care of the soak she'd earned. He waved back beside a cruel, scowling man and a cheerful Sue, right as she kicked off her journey. As they watched her walk off, Haiji said Belfair felt like a genuinely good person, and Sue immediately snapped her head up to ask, straight to his face, if he was into women like her, only to get hit with a razor-sharp, sideways glare from Cruel. Heat flooded his cheeks, sweat poured down his brow, and he stammered out a weak denial he just couldn't make sense. He got absolutely crushed by the moment, spun on his heel and bolted from that awkward mess. Cruel screamed after him that he was running away, while Sue yelled for him to stop and wait. Meanwhile, in a nearby town, a young swordswoman in armor sat alone at a table, staring off with a heavy, worried look. Her silence shattered the moment Belfair showed up, straight up scolding her for showing up late. The swordswoman, all flustered, kept insisting Belfair was the boss. Then Belfair cut her off like, "Nope," reminding Master Belphibia that she'd been told 100 times to just call her Belle and to drop the fancy formal talk. Then she pushed for answers, grilling Belphibia about why she was acting so stubborn when everyone back in her hometown had been won over without a fight. And the moment Belphibia heard hometown, she froze, completely bewildered, asking what hometown Belfair even meant. She freezes at the bizarre question, but Belfair just shrugs it off and orders her master to drop it for now. Then Belphibia leans in and asks if she finally tracked down the sword she's been hunting. Belfair fires back by handing over a sword in its sheath, square guard and all, and confirms she finally found it. Then she blurts out an apology like it's her fault it got lost. But Belfair cuts that down quick, saying the blame is shared because she couldn't find what she was hunting either. Her student's playful energy doesn't slip past anyone. Belphibia even notices how Belfair seems downright thrilled. With a bright giggle, Belfair admits she met someone truly interesting, and it leaves Belphibia staring like, "Wait, why are my apprentices acting so different all of a sudden?" She quietly turns Belfair's words over in her mind, and suddenly the past conversation crashes back in, because Belfair had said this fighter's style was unrefined, like an amateur, yet it somehow still hit with real impact. Belphibia's daydream gets shattered when Belfair's teasing voice cuts in, telling her to quit fixating on the people she can't stop staring at, especially when they're trading all those signals. And when her face burns with embarrassment, he still presses that he's worried even if she's gotten the hang of it. Then a voice nearby gasps and blurts out, "Wait, did you really do that?" Indu Kane's voice rings out as she tells Belfair this is the perfect match, and it's time to hit night training. The two start walking, but Belfair yells back for her master to wait. Once they're gone, Belphibia is left alone, and a hot blush creeps over her face as she realizes with a jolt she's nothing like Kane. As night creeps in, one lone star ignites in the twilight sky like it's bursting to be seen. With a dazzling grin, Cruel cheers at Haiji, yelling that she's stumbled onto a weird-looking tree. Paul barrels into the workshop. There's Haji, hammer in hand. He freezes mid-swing and Sue stands right beside him, watching like she's waiting for something to blow up. Gathered there, Cruel eyes locked onto those tall, segmented stalks. Then she ripped out a cruel remark, saying she'd never seen a plant like this before, and her curiosity went into overdrive. Hagi jumps in and raises one of the stalks, calling it bamboo, then says it's everywhere in his world, and the cruel one just stares back, utterly baffled. He studies the bamboo and a sharp idea hits him. Hero summoning is ancient magic. So maybe seeds from this plant snagged onto a past hero's clothes got pulled into this world and finally sprouted into something new. With that plan set in stone, he snaps his head to the others and blares, "I'm using bamboo to make fishing rods." Cruel and Sue stare back with blank faces, and Cruel cuts in, "Fishing." That buzz vanishes in a blink. Right in its place, pure excitement erupts. Cruel can't wait and blurts that she wants in, and Sue practically throws her hand up, yelling that she wants to try too. With everyone fired up, Haiji leans in and asks if they're really ready to go fishing. Then there's the next spot. A calm river, crystal water gliding over smooth stones, wrapped in thick green trees beneath a blazing, beautiful sky. With fishing rods in hand, the whole crew rolls up to the riverbank, buzzing with excitement. Cruel and Sue-chan especially, ready to smash the fishing trip ahead, all three rocking fresh summer outfits Phil had just handed them. He gets to work, checks every piece of equipment, and confirms the setup is finally ready, while Cruel and Sue crouch in the shallows, eyes locked on him as he lines everything up for them. Presents the bait, and they light up like kids in a candy store, gushing over how they're going to haul in fish after fish, while Sue Stare can't even hide it, wide-eyed and already picturing the catch. Their lines sank and their fate began. Bobbers drifted peacefully on the calm water while the group settled in, waiting like the next cast was about to change everything. Time crawls by with zero action. Cruel stretches out a huge yawn and Sue snaps that they still haven't reeled in a single catch. Cruel grumbles that it's all that thing's fault and Haji just stares back like, what thing? She tells them a huge presence is lurking under the surface, scaring every last fish away, and down in the deep, a dark shadow surges into view with two glowing eyes confirming her warning. With her patience drained dry, she snaps, I'll handle this myself. Then a bow of raw energy blooms in her hands. Boom, seconds later, a towering column of water detonates from the river with a deafening roar. She's standing tall in the middle of the pouring chaos, bow still yanked back, and she screams, how was that? Behind her, Haji and Sue are soaked to the bone on the riverbank, utterly stunned, completely speechless. When the blast finally dies down, a giant scaled beast drifts dead across the river like it's lost its heartbeat. Haji stares, stunned that it looks skinned from head to tail, then his eyes widen at how fast it all happened. As the water spits into view, vicious blasts tear out and soak everyone, and down beneath the surface an irritated Sue shoots the realization. If she lets her temper get too hot and transforms, they'll nab her. He pats the sobbing Cruel on the head, murmurs that the river creature was probably her master, and tells her not to panic. She just wanted to fish and couldn't have known it was a trap. Sue watches them, worry tightening her face, and whispers his name. Her eyes sharpen, jaw set with steel, and she clenches her fists as she fires back. She will catch that creature, and she's demanding they build a fishing rod that can handle the job. After she pours her heart out, the whole crew rushes straight to the master blacksmith's workshop. He hears their plea, then tells Krull straight up that forging something like that won't be easy without the right materials, and he worries aloud that even if soft iron could work, it won't be the best choice. Krull leans in, eyes locked like she's fully getting every painful detail. His words hit like a spark, and Haiji's realization snaps into place. His eyes fly wide as he quietly shoots down the idea that they're missing what they need. He digs deep into every bit of lifelong training, waiting for the moment he can finally forge his own blade. He flashes back to the sword Belfair crafted for him and to the time he'd begged to make it with soft iron. Then it hits him, a brand new purpose locking into place like fate. He clenches his fist and decides this is absolutely worth a shot. He gently patted Cruel on the head and she winked right back, praising his advice and pressing him, so, did you figure it out? With his plan locked in, the crew kicked off the job, and right away, sparks burst from the ambulance like a warning. Cruel slammed a heavy sledgehammer down with bone-crushing force, while he, now dressed in an apron and headband, handled the delicate work like a pro. As he threw himself into the work, his focus snapped into place, and a memory from the royal palace burst up in his mind. They drilled into him that a blacksmith's real power wasn't magic at all, but something even more crucial. He remembered his hooded instructor drilling into him that sure, talent and knowledge mattered, but there was one piece he could never lose: the most important thing about magic. The lesson drilled into him how to picture the outcome clear in his mind, then right there, sweat pouring down, the answer hit like lightning. He clamped down on the metal, focused all his will, and commanded it to become soft iron. His relentless focus paid off. Right outside the workshop, he hauled back and hurled the brand new fishing rod with a bone-crushing cast, the rod snapping through the air with razor-perfect flexibility while Cruel and Sue watched in awe. Their eyes popped open in sync, glittering with pure shock and unfiltered joy at finally seeing the finished masterpiece. She burst into cheers, arms flung wide, shouting that the rod was bending and swaying under the pressure, while Cruel stood right there, staring in disbelief, because even though it was forged from iron, it flexed like bamboo. Her shock snapped into focus and she marched straight to the practical part. All we need now is a fishing line, she said, and she already had a plan in her head. She yanked one glittering strand of her own hair free and thrust it toward Haiji, daring him to use it. Then he inspected the little rod, nodding along like, yep, her hair would fit it perfectly. With the line finally locked in, Cruel grinned and swore they could now corner the river's master. Revenge time was here. Their eyes snapped to the river as the surface began to ripple. Something huge was sliding beneath the water just under the surface. Seconds later, the dark, scaled back of a massive fish broke the surface right there on the water, and from the bank the crowd erupted. we've got our target. The creature was absolutely massive, its powerful body slicing through the water like it had a mission. With a sharp burst of focus, Haiji dug in his stance, snapped the rod forward and whipped out a fishing line with one fierce flick of his wrist. He swore the baits had turned alive the instant they hit the river, splashing down and rippling the surface in tight little waves. Then he cranked his fishing rod's reel, and right under the surface, a bunch of smaller fish kept gliding along, totally clueless as the lure drifted down from above. From the riverbank, Krull and Sue stared in awe. Krull swore the bait was actually swimming, and Sue couldn't help laughing because it looked exactly like a real fish. Out of the deep darkness, a monstrous shadow rose, then a whiskered maw snapped open and swallowed the bait in one bone-crushing gulp, blasting a violent shockwave straight up the line that hit the summoned man instantly. The rod buckled hard as that massive force yanked him forward, and the water exploded into violent churn around them. Haiji stared, stunned, finally grasping just how terrifying their quarry really was. The summoned man clenched his teeth, awed by the sheer pull, and breathed easier when he saw the rod somehow still held. He dug his heels into the soft earth, muscles screaming as the creature yanked him forward, and then, whoosh, the ground crumbled under his feet while his body got dragged, no matter how hard he fought. Even with every ounce of fight in him, he got yanked forward right as the ground tried to rip out from under his feet. Krull and Sue came barreling in, clamping onto his back and arms to pin him in place. Raised by his own crew, he burst out, demanding Krull and Saya's help, then screamed for Dorita by name. And even as Haiji just stood there, frozen in shock, he yelled that a delicious reward would be waiting for his patience later. He roars as the line tightens hard, that strange, segmented lure snapping through the air. And when he realizes he can't muscle it alone, he yells for everyone to grab on. Sue and Krull waste no time, sprinting in and hauling with everything they've got. With a single fierce shout, they heave with everything they've got, and the river's surface erupts into a wild, violent burst of water. Right out of the river's depths, the master bursts up, an absolute monster of a catfish, and the impact hurls the trio backward, but they cling on tight. Meanwhile, the summoned man and Sue just gape, staring in total shock at the gigantic creature they've hooked. After he crashes to the ground, he snaps back with, "Are you all okay?" Krull rubs her sore head, grumbles that it hurt like hell, then assures him she's fine and that Sue is fine too. Their focus snaps back to the massive beached fish, and Krull lets out a furious, stunned scream at its freakish size. Then the summonman scans the area and demands where Hoggy went. From over there, Haiji watches everything unfold and tells his unseen partner, "We actually caught it." Then he shuts down any talk of it being a close call, because in his mind it wasn't luck at all. It was their power that sealed the win. Back on the riverbank, the whole crew is already getting to work, giant catfish wrapped in big leaves hauled straight over the fire pit. Sue and Krull hum like they're in their own happy world, and Sue belts out a cheerful cry. The meal's ready. The river's monster is roasted to perfection. Krull bellows in triumphant cruelty that the master of the river has been cooked whole, and then both she and Sue stare in pure awe at their jaw-dropping feast, eyes blazing with what they're about to savor next. She lets out a big, hearty laugh, then digs in with a huge bite of cooked fish while the cat-eared girl beside her chews with her cheeks puffed up, her words totally muffled by the food. Nearby, the summoned man keeps warning her to watch out for the bones. With a bright, joyful grin, she calls out to Haiji, thanks him, and swears the meal is delicious. While he stays off to the side, bites into his own portion, and quietly thinks to himself that eating the fish they all caught together feels like the whole definition of a slow, peaceful life, something he never saw coming in this other world. Her face lights up with pure bliss, eyes shut tight as she savors another big bite of just cooked fish, completely swept away by the simple joy of a great meal. Under a sky split of clouds, a thick, powerful force rolls in and dominates the air. As he heads into the woods, Haiji snaps, warning her not to run too wild or she'll trip and tumble. Then, with a bright grin, she swears she's totally fine. Confidence evaporates the second she stumbles and lurches forward, and Haiji snaps her name out in a panicked shout. He rushes to her side and plants a hand on her head, panicking as he blurts out, "Are you okay? Does anything hurt?" Down on the ground, she insists she's totally fine. She springs up on her feet, eyes blazing as she points at her prize, mushrooms. Then she yells his name and he snaps his head around in pure surprise like, "You found mushrooms?" There are two kinds of mushrooms. One is a ghostly pale yellow, nicknamed for looking just like an egg yolk, and the other is dark and almost black, so sneaky it looks exactly like a poisonous kind. Sue proudly flashes one of each and nails the names Tamagoro Dake and Dokumadoki Dake, then Haiji instantly shuts it down, shaking his head like, "I can't tell them apart, not a clue." He lets out a faint smile, clocking that for a white wolf like Sue, Sen's name alone probably screams it loud and clear. While he's still mulling it over, she calls his name again. While the others scavenged, Cruel erupted with a triumphant scream and held up the giant mushroom she just uncovered. She held it up to the crew like, "Look at this," and marveled at how massive it was, then blurted, "What is it, some kind of mushroom?" before even worrying it might be a demon beast. Right when no one could speak, a vicious shriek ripped through the air and warned Haiji. He spun around as two huge, wolf-like Asho hounds with dark, wild manes burst from the trees, snarling like they meant it. Hounds exploded forward with zero hesitation, dark fur and razor claws streaking straight for the small group. But right before the beast could slam into them, three warriors from the White Wolf tribe sprang in to intercept the attack. Sue froze, then gasped with pure relief, shouting for her mom and dad the moment she recognized them. Her parents burst in and swept her up in a tight embrace, and Haiji just froze in shock. Then he blurted out how they even knew they'd be there, and Sue's mother reassured him she was okay. He whipped his head toward her parents, face set in stone, and learned the White Wolf tribe had the same nightmare. Those Ashu hounds were wrecking everything with their sudden spike in activity. Surya, Sue's mother, looked crushed while her father, Igal, confirmed it. Haiji went pale and blurted out how hard those beasts had to be to hit that level. They all said the current pack leader is the real nightmare. Sure, they're formidable, but this guy already gravely injured several of their own in a brutal night raid. While Cruel, gripping Sue, muttered that if it were a dragon she'd have a shot, yet fighting in the forest would swing things against them. Haiji's face tightens as the memory of that multi-tailed Ashuhound leader flashes back, and the moment he recognizes the beast, grim clarity hits his eyes. He finally understands exactly who they're up against. While Sue is still taking it all in, her parents lay the fear on full display. Her mom, Surya, warns that these creatures have been snatching their food and supplies, and her dad, Igal, growls that the hound's claws and fangs cut dangerously deep. Its moves are lightning fast, and worst of all, they've started moving as a tight, organized pack. He looks down at Sue and she stares up at him with those hopeful eyes, then determination hardens in his chest as he clenches his fist, silently vowing that he owes that specific hound a debt and that he's going to help. Caught off guard by the offer nobody dared to say out loud, Eagle asks if he's truly sure. Haiji locks eyes with him and nods, then suggests he can forge defensive gear for them. Cruel and Sue flanked him and he stepped up to address the tribe, declaring that the forest's troubles were now their own. Then he bowed and offered his help, praying he could be useful in even the smallest way. A rush of pure relief and joy bursts across Agal, Surya, and the rest of the White Wolf tribe as their ears snap up together, and they pour out heartfelt gratitude, trusting their hopes with him. Later, Eagle shows them the problem firsthand, heavy, clanking plate armor and all. He tells the White Wolf tribe that their real power is mobility, then drops a brutal gauntlet with a hard point. They don't want to drag around gear like that. In a blazing forge, Haiji, now in a grubby work apron, tightens his grip on the gauntlet and inspects it close. When Gaul calls it out, Haiji nods and admits he actually uncovered the whole set while cleaning the workshop. Then he declares that sure, normal armor is tough but weighs a ton, so he's going to forge something new, lighter, different, and built his way. He kicked things off by unveiling a drawing die, an ultra-specific tool that crushes and reshapes metal rods through sheer plastic deformation. He grabbed the device and broke down what it did, and Sue, watching from the side, thought it was just some gambling dice. Haiji smiled and corrected her, making it crystal clear it was something else entirely, then told her to sit back and watch the whole process. Cruel lunged forward, hungry to deliver the power the operation demanded. Haiji shoved a metal rod's end into her hands, right after it was jammed into the die, and barked, "Pull as hard as you can." Cruel flashed a confident grin and got to work. She eagerly obeyed, muscles snapping tight as she yanked with crushing power, while Hagi gritted his teeth and used a lever to hold the machine steady. With sheer brute force, Sue hauled the thick iron rod through the die like it was nothing, watching it glide and thin out right before her eyes. while Haiji grinned and said they'd keep doing it again and again, feeding it through smaller and smaller holes until it was exactly what they needed. He stared at the final result, this tiny bundle of metal wires so thin they looked like thread. Sue couldn't stop staring at the sheer transformation, and Hage finally said it's a metalworking technique called drawing. With everything finally ready, Haiji swung around to Sue's parents, Egil and Surya, and told them straight up. The next step would need the White Wolf tribe's power, so they had to rally every last person as fast as they could. After he made his request, the whole tribe spilled onto the floor and gathered around, Haji, Cruel, and Sue right in the middle. Then they teamed up, side by side, and started weaving those brand new metal wires into something intricate and real. He snaps into action, telling the tribe to cinch iron wire tight around a metal rod, then cut the formed coil into neat little rings. Following his orders, the whole White Wolf tribe, Cruel included, springs into action, hacking away at the coils while a huge pile of those tiny metal rings starts piling up fast. Sue beams with pride and thrusts a huge handful of finished rings into the air, shouting that she made so many, her little hands overflowing with the sweet rewards of her hard work. Her mother, Surya, watches with a soft smile and can tell Sue is working hard because she wants to be useful to everyone, and when Haiji asks if she's enjoying herself, Sue lights up and cheers, "Yes, I'm having fun." He grins and gently pats her head, murmuring that he gets it, and seeing that side of the tribe team up with that kind of heart makes everything feel so damn hopeful. After weeks of grind and sweat, the project finally clicks into place and it's done. Egil stares at the finished piece, a shirt woven from interlocking metal rings, and Haiji immediately clocks it as chainmail. Egil can't stop gaping, marveling at how insanely light it feels and how much freer it makes him move than heavy plate armor. He explains that this armor will keep the White Wolf tribe moving like nothing happened, not slowing them down a bit. Sure, it's a basic shield, but it's built to hold firm against the Asherhound's attacks. So then he pushes them to test it, just to be absolutely sure. He stood facing the wooden dummy, now wearing a brand new prototype chainmail shirt, while Surya watched beside him with nerves on fire, asking, right to his face, if he was really ready for her to go all out. In the blink of an eye, she shot forward like a streak of lightning, then smashed out a brutal chop. Egil, her husband, threw his hands up over his face, unable to bear seeing it land. The strike landed with a vicious crack asterisk. While Haiji, Sue, and Cruel stared in total shock, Egil dropped his hand, eyes bulging like he couldn't believe it, because that thick log on the dummy got cut straight in half, but the chainmail underneath stayed flawless, not a scratch. And Surya, she was frozen, yelling that the armor was unreal for surviving her full-force hit. Egil's doubt melted instantly. He whipped around to Hagi, eyes blazing. He raved about the armor like it was the key to finally going toe-to-toe with the Asu hounds, and Hagi nodded along but warned him they still had to forge enough armor for the whole tribe to take on the packs. Seizing the moment, Haiji whipped the crowd into action, roaring for everyone to start production right now. Then the whole White Wolf tribe, plus Cruel and Sue, shot their fists up and yelled in one thunderous, determined cheer. With morale blasting sky-high, the whole tribe threw themselves into the work. Haiji pounded at an anvil, forging metal rings while Cruel swung in alongside him. And across the camp, the other groups huddled up and started the careful, piece-by-piece armor assembly. The grind kept rolling. Surya sat shoulder to shoulder with the other warriors, deft fingers twisting and locking those rings together, while even young Sue jumped in, her small hands threading the metal loops with razor-focused concentration. Piece by piece, the chain mail sections piled up, proof sheet after sheet that their hard work was finally building something real, and hope was roaring to life. With the mass production finally done, the White Wolf tribe's warriors march into position, each one armored in brand new chainmail forged to perfection, while their leader, Egil, loudly checks that everyone's outfitted and the whole tribe erupts in a single, thunderous, yes. Then he whips around to Haiji and bows so deeply it's pure respect. Egil storms out a heartfelt apology, insists it's not Haiji's problem, and says the trouble in the forest is something their tribe has to handle, but Haiji's not letting it end there. He lifts his gaze, sword perched on his shoulder, and flat out says he's going with them, then asks if he can borrow one of their hounds for the hunt. That request hits Egil like a shock, because Haiji isn't just tagging along, he's ready to throw himself into the fight. Right before the debate can move on, Cruel strides forward and declares, loud and clear, "I'm coming too, because as a Doldia resident she refuses to sit back and let everyone else take the hit. Her bold declaration ignites Yongsu. He blurts out, "Of course, I'll take you." And Haiji stares at that tiny girl, stunned by how fiercely and suddenly she's decided. She's instantly hit with non-stop protests from her parents. Surya snaps that it's way too dangerous and demands she play the good girl and wait, but Sue explodes back, screaming that she's part of the White Wolf tribe and she's fighting alongside the others, while Haiji just stands there watching the stormy family clash, a bead of sweat crawling down his temple. Egil snaps around to face her, serious as steel, and asks if she's really brave enough to risk her life in battle. Then Sulak steps right back, steady and unshaken, and says yes because she wants to help everyone. Their eyes snap into a silent, no-blinking showdown, Sue's stare blazing with pure determination, while her father's gaze weighs down every word she's asking him to give. She calls out Haiji's name in a calm, soothing voice, a gentle smile on her face as her eyes slip shut. Igil's father snaps with rage and slams down a hard no, but Haiji won't budge. Standing shoulder to shoulder with Cruel and Sue, he tells Igil he gets the fear, then vows that he and Cruel will keep her safe. Once she made her choice crystal clear, she spun on her heel and strode off, leaving her mother and a fellow tribesman to stare as she decided how to make her exit. A short time later, Igil stands front and center before the whole White Wolf tribe, raises a hand and makes it official. Sue is with him, and he's bringing Haji and Cruel into their family too. His wife, Surya, declares that these new members finally complete their pack, and then Egil steps in, his voice booming with command. He rallies the White Wolf tribe to shout with pride, fight with courage, and drive the Ashu hounds out of their forests. His words light a fire in everyone. Whole tribesmen roar as fists shoot into the sky, and a wave of pure determination crashes over them. Right at the front, Egil steps forward and officially declares war. The hero, the Cruel, and Sue huddle atop a jagged ridge, their silhouettes razor-cut against a sea of dense forest rolling out beneath them. The whole crew is finally here, every single member packed together around the hero at the center, with Gaul and Surya at his sides, plus the rest of the White Wolf warriors standing shoulder to shoulder, grim as steel, ready to strike. Igal, the tribe's leader, keeps a stone-still face and unwavering spine, while the hero beside him grips their focus like a weapon, cold eyes forward, fully aware they're not the only hunters stalking this territory. Suddenly, his senses snap to attention. Egil blurts out that she can smell an Ashohound, and it's not just one. The hero demands where it is, and she points, cruelly claiming it's over there, then catches herself and admits there are actually two. With every unanswered discrepancy piling up, he snaps a small metallic tube up to his eye, clicks it open, and just like that, reveals a spyglass built to crush distance and show him things far away. He blurts out in shock, demanding to know how the hero can possibly see that far, and then, through the lens, the hero locks eyes on a lone, dark-furred creature slipping through the trees, declaring it with absolute certainty, an Ashuhao. He drops the device and his face snaps serious. Cruel grins and mocks that his nose and ears aren't exactly top-notch, but he shoots back that they're more than enough for what he needs. While Sue leans in, grinning as she peeks through the spyglass, the hero barks his order: they'll tail the hounds and they'll smoke out the leader. With their objective locked in, the whole crew moves like a single heartbeat, boots slamming the dry ground, dust exploding behind them as they march off the ridge, dead set on their goal. They push deeper into the forest and Igil suddenly stops. There's a fresh scent of the Asu hounds right nearby. He guesses it's a tiny pack of about 8 to 10, and the hero shoots him a worried look, demanding the exact distance. He blurts out a rough estimate: was it really about 400 meters, give or take, then counts his 450 paces and fires the question at Egil. Is this tiny group actually the leader's pack? Paul breaks down how hound packs are built, and it gets way messier than you'd think. The group they're hunting is just a minor crew, while the real boss barks orders to several smaller packs, each of those splitting again into tighter units, stacking into a crazy, layered hierarchy. Right when they surge forward, he suddenly slams on the brakes. Something dark has caught up to him, and it's bad. He whips around at the hero, dread flooding his face, then blurts out that he's caught the scent of the White Wolves, his own tribe, and he's terrified they've been taken, so he has to rush to their rescue right now, but the hero snaps at him to hold up. I'll demand they move right now, because he just revealed the pack we're hunting is way bigger than we thought, like an army, and he's counting on his crew to be rescued. Then Sue blurts out her father's name and her worry spills out. As Eggle bolts off, the hero whips around to Sue and growls that they're going after him. Sue nods back just as determined. He rockets through the trees at breakneck speed, and as the hero and Sue pound after him, he's hit with a stunned silence, because the White Wolf tribe's physical strength is unreal, and suddenly he realizes he can barely keep up. He finally reached the scent's origin, a huge gap carved into the rock, then leaned into the dim light, calling out for a gall as his breath seized in his throat. He couldn't wrap his head around why anyone from the White Wolf tribe would end up in a place like this. The place that welcomed them was downright grim. Inside that clearing, a pack of snarling Asho hounds had a circle locked tight around a group of captured White Wolf tribe members huddled together like prey. Eggle stood there, eyes narrowing as the whole setup clicked in his mind. This was a trap, and his people had been lured right into it. The standoff implodes in a heartbeat. Guttural snarls erupt as the Asho hounds crash the scene, hurling themselves at a gall from every side. Sudden chaos exploded. One of the hounds tore free from the pack and launched straight at the hero, jaws gaping wide. Seeing the hero in danger, Eggle's face snapped into cold fury. Then he whipped around to cut off the threat. He streaked forward like a blur, claws flaring. One brutal swipe sliced through the hound's head, and it dropped dead on the spot. With the danger crushed in an instant, the clearing erupted into a full-blown war. Freed White Wolf tribe members surged into the fray, their claws blazing as they slammed straight into the charging Asho hounds. As the fury of fur and claws exploded around them, the hero yanked Sue to the ground and clapped a shield over her head, while steel-hot combat ripped past. All he could do was stare as the Gaul, along with his tribe, surged forward at blinding speed, slicing through their enemies like they were nothing. He's gasping, utterly drained, yet he did it, driving back the last Asher hounds with sheer willpower. Right beside him, Sue lets out a wave of relief and tells him they were saved because of his gauntlets. After the attack, the whole crew huddles up and starts dissecting what just happened. Surya can't believe the hounds would stoop to stolen goods and pelts as bait, and the hero realizes their playbook is way sneakier than he ever guessed. Meanwhile, Eggle blows up in pure fury, shouting that if they were going to pull a stunt like that, they should have gone for a full-on assault, and he's not letting them off the hook. Sue moans that they're totally boxed in, flashes a confident grin and taps his temple, then swears that sure, they might be outmatched in a few ways, but when it comes to thinking, humans never fold. A few days later, his plan finally snaps into action. He strides beside a Gaul and the White Wolf tribe, pushing through the forest with pure, no-nonsense purpose. Their target, a Sioux hound's den. The pack sprawls among the trees, totally blind to the danger closing in. Right outside the den, he clenched his fist and hardened his face with pure resolve, and when Eggle watched him, both leaders shared a silent, unmistakable understanding. With one thunderous shout, he slams the operation into motion, and the whole White Wolf tribe erupts as one, surging down the slope to smash into the startled pack. The clash hits instantly, pure, brutal chaos. He snaps his gauntlet up to block a lunging hound, and the next second the Gaul and other warriors slam into the pack at terrifying speed, claws and weapons ripping straight through the enemy lines. He barrels straight at one of the Asho hounds, fully set to fight, and the thing bares its teeth like it's smiling. Then he feels it, a jolt through his chest. It's laughing at him. Something deeper is going on here, and he can't shake that gut feeling. As a brutal echo detonates through the forest, Haiji instantly spots it as the cruel signal. It snaps the air in half. He whips around and catches her clutching her head, visibly breaking. At once, Ig reads the grim realization blazing across his face. Surya roars for everyone to fall back exactly as planned, and the whole crew whips around and bolts out of the den, igniting their strategy on the spot. Asho hounds launch into a frantic chase, paws pounding the forest floor as a distant hellflare screams that the hunt is on. Eggle snaps a look over his shoulder, jaw tight with pure tension. They storm into the clearing, and Haiji's eyes lock on the same thing they banked on. Ambush is already waiting for them. Igal watches from beside Sue, and just like Haiji promised, everything is unfolding exactly according to plan. A deadly trap snaps shut. One of the hounds yelps in shock as it's caught. Haiji spots it instantly and screams that this is the moment they strike. At his command, the earth rips open and launches a brutal line of earthen spikes, skewering even more charging Asho hounds. Haiji bellows at everyone to slam in while the enemy is still thrown off balance. Meanwhile, Cruel, still the bait, sits all alone in a different slice of the forest, and two Ashu hounds suddenly halt right in front of her. She snaps the question, wondering why they've stopped chasing, and one snarling beast shoots back an answer. She whips around to face the two Ashu hounds on their heels, grinning as she playfully taunts them into chasing her deeper into the forest. Her taunts hit hard, like a switch flipping, because the hounds explode into a furious roar and hurl themselves forward, and that grin of hers instantly dies as wide-eyed panic crashes in, screaming that she has to run right now. She rockets through the trees, and the beasts come roaring right behind her, pounding the ground. As they sprint across the clearing, both hounds slam their claws into the ground and screech to a sudden, jarring stop. Their sudden stop jerks everything to a halt, and she freezes too. Confusion hits her face as she turns to see the hounds just stand there, watching from afar. Before she can even process what's happening, a blur of movement explodes from the side, and one of the hounds gets slammed hard to the ground. The attacker is unmasked as Sue, and with fierce determination, she slams a massive weapon down hard. Then, with the beast gone, she whips her gaze to the dragon girl and shouts her name. She steps in beside Cruel as he pats her head and sings her praises for nailing the decoy, while the last Ashu hound glares on its buddy already beaten. She praised Haiji to the skies, saying he'd done an amazing job baiting the Ashu hounds, until Haiji just grinned and corrected her because it wasn't only the two of them running that plan. His words hit hard the moment their full strategy finally spilled out, because the last Ashu hounds weren't just cornered in a clearing, they were totally surrounded, boxed in between Haiji's crew and a lethal line of White Wolf tribe warriors that had been waiting in the dark. With the enemy boxed in and their allies set in place, Haiji's face turned stone-cold rage and resolve blazing at once as he snapped that defending time was done. Now it was their turn to strike. He burst into the room and everyone huddled around the table. Then Haiji slapped down a game board and laid out the whole scheme. Use one person as bait to yank the Ashu hounds into one spot, then ambush them. Igil Su's father calls it brilliant, but the real question, who's going to be the decoy, hangs like a knife in the air. Cruel voices raise the alarm, yet before anyone else can answer, Su shoots her hand up and volunteers with zero hesitation. She slaps a burst of confidence onto Haiji's chest, swearing she'll do it right now. Haiji glares down at the tiny girl, doubting she's built for something this intense. Behind them, Cruel is thrown off, visibly rattled by how bold she just got. Su snaps her hand up high, swearing she'll take the role, while Haiji scrambles to talk her out of it and warns that playing the decoy is brutally dangerous. Cruel even backs him up, yet Haiji just stares down, torn between worry and sheer frustration as her stubbornness refuses to quit. Her playful smile evaporates and fierce determination slams in, eyes locked. She declares, clear as thunder, I'm from the White Wolf tribe, I won't be a burden. He's caught off guard by her sudden heat, staring at her like he's seeing her resolve for the first time, because she's deadly serious, and after a beat he just gives in. All right. Su's face lights up with pure joy, then she surges forward and latches onto Haiji in a fierce hug, thanking him again and again like she can't believe it, while Cruel just stares, head reeling in stunned disbelief. Then he shifts his focus to Cruel, demanding she back up Su, and when Cruel locks eyes with that determined girl, she nods and agrees. She finally gets it and she promises, I'm going to protect Su. With the roles locked in and the support secured, Haiji whips around toward Fasigal in Syria, Su still clinging to him, and demands her parents' final okay for the deadly plan. He got his answer from Su's parents. Surya's face lit up with a proud smile, and Igil chimed in that he was grateful Hagi had come to them to ask permission. Asagal softly brushed his wife's hair, Surya's eyes filled with love as he gazed at their daughter, then he told Su, we're counting on you. Haiji and Cruel stood back, watching that tender family moment, and their plan got the final green light. On the decoy's plains, the fight detonated like thunder. White Wolf warriors slammed into the ravenous Ashu hounds, and steel met teeth in a brutal clash. Suddenly, Haiji snapped into alarm as the pack's monstrous leader finally stomped onto the battlefield, huge, terrifying, impossible to ignore. While far off, Igil's gaze locked onto it, rage and resolve hardening in his eyes. He roared out a challenge, vowing he'd never forgive the beast for what it did, and then Igil smashed forward with a ferocious charge straight at the monstrous hound. Igil's brave charge got crushed by sheer overwhelming force. He he got swatted aside and blasted into a nearby tree with a brutal thud, while Sue and Surya screamed his name in pure horror. The hound leader finished off its enemy, then blasted a wave of energy straight from its mouth, while Haiji froze in terror, yelling that the beast had just snapped one of Cruel's arrows out of the air. They regrouped and stared down the beast, and Haiji's eyes widened at its unnatural muscle. No way this was normal, it had to be a mutant. He snapped his head to the dragon girl beside him. "So, what is this, Cruel?" Carol snaps her voice into the air, ordering her companion to hold up. Then she squares up and studies the beast. She knows it's a freakishly strong one, and if this thing escalates, she's ready to shift into her dragon form whether she wants to or not. He stays stubbornly resolute as Cruelty snaps back at him, grilling him for why he won't trust his own strength more. He snaps his eyes back on that terrifying hound, his choice sealed, and roars, "I've got this." The beast refuses to budge, its killing intent so sharp it pricks the air like a living thing. He rockets through the air on a brutal dive, then he snaps his head up, eyes blazing with panic as the creature comes crashing down on him. He steels himself and blasts a roar with everything he's got. Then the hound rips into a terrifying howl and Maul swings wide open, screaming out just one word, "I think," with a savage upward slash, his blade splits the beast clean in two, blasting a fiery spray of blood across the air. Igal, Surya, Sue, and even Cruel, every single one of them freezes on the spot, speechless, with their faces locked in raw, unbelievable shock. The massive Ashu hound leader crumples at last, jaws hanging open mid-snarl as the clearing falls deadly quiet. Then the tribe erupts in stunned cries. Lord Haji did the impossible, he actually killed the beast. With their leader down, the remaining Ashu hounds crumble, losing the will to fight as they scatter. Egil tackles his grief, stares his father in the eyes, and lets them fade into the distance, convinced they're harmless now that their head is gone. Surya nods in total agreement. In this raw panic, they don't pose a real threat as the tribe locks down the area, Haiji finally breaks, exhaustion crushing him at last. He coughs out a ragged breath, and that fresh cut on his cheek is right there. Cruel darts over, shouting his name as Haiji stumbles on. For a heartbeat, her exhaustion vanishes as Sue sprints to him, her face lighting up with pure admiration. She blurts that he's incredible, so strong, and she can't stop gushing at how calm and deadly he stays even in battle. He slips on a small smile, and when the sky finally clears, Cruel turns to Haji and Sue and pours out heartfelt thanks for their bravery. For gratitude, everything flips into motion, a real turning point. Sometime later, the whole crew crowds together in front of a village home, and then bam, Ashu Hound's former monster of a leader is there too, now shrunk down to wolf-sized, sitting calm and peaceful among them. With the tension finally broken, it's time to celebrate. Egil lifts his tankard and toasts both the Ashu Hound's defeat and the fierce bravery his daughter Sue has shown. The moment he speaks, everyone erupts, mugs shoot up to the sky, and their voices slam together in one massive, cheering roar. The victory celebration explodes into full force. Women of the White Wolf tribe sing and dance, and then the Cruel one, cheeks stuffed and smiling, happily devours several huge bread rolls in one go. AG jumps in on the celebrations, pouring drinks for the tribe, and he can't help but stare when an energetic Sue climbs onto a barrel, then starts serving her people like a one-woman storm. He's surrounded by the joyful tri-members, bursts into a big hearty laugh, and gets swept up in that wave of cheers and pure relief. Then they all chow down, clink drinks, and sing together like one happy crew. At the heart of the village, a colossal bonfire roared so bright it lit up the whole night, and the White Wolf tribe's victory feast kept raging for 3 non-stop days and nights. When the wild celebration finally dies down, a heavy silence crashes in. Haiji, Cruel, and Sustan stand before Egil, Surya, and the other tribe elders, ready to step into leadership. Egil drops his head so low it almost touches the ground, pouring out the tribe's massive gratitude. Then he thanks AG for everything. AG, looking strangely humbled, admits he only gave a tiny bit of help. The tribe leader keeps going, saying that if Haiji hadn't shown up, they'd still be cowering from the Ashu hounds, and he makes it crystal clear that it's only because of Haiji that they can finally unite as one pack again. Then Haiji leans in, eyes sharp and thoughtful, ready to answer. His sentence gets ripped to shreds before it can finish. as every last white wolf fighter with Gaul and Surya at the front drops into a flawless bow all at once, silent as death, thanks and respect burning through them for him, cruel and sure. He and every soul in the white wolf tribe dips their heads together, one powerful wave of gratitude, and they formally thank Lord Haji for everything he's done for them. He stands there stone still, face hidden in mystery, while a gentle wind sweeps by and snatches away the small leaves like a quiet warning. The snap of a banner flapping in the wind slices the air as an official announcement booms, declaring the hero's departure. His mind snaps back to that moment, mounted, ready to bolt. Back then, he finally understood what he really was, a polished figurehead, nothing more than a decorative hero. He knew the true muscle wasn't him, it was the knights riding in beside him. He stared down a row of faceless armored soldiers, and the moment he braced to hear what they were here to do, his resolve hardened like steel. The memory slips away, yanking him back to the present. Then with Sue and Cruel looming beside him, he brushes off their thanks and tells them, straight up, that he's the one who should be grateful. He offers his hand like a fresh start, urging them to drop by any time and promise they'll share another drink again someday. Eagle snaps into the handshake with a huge, honest smile and instantly agrees to the invitation, while Surya beside him practically glows with pure joy, like he just watched a dream click into place. His friendly words jolt Cruel into a brutal realization, her eyes snap wide as the thought hits her like a punch. Was Haiji really planning to run back to his own kind soon? Sue turns back toward her parents and a pang of sadness hits her face. Then her father, Eagle, steps forward and tells Haiji this. Sue chose that deadly warrior role herself and now the whole tribe welcomes her with open arms. With a surge of fresh resolve, the young girl lifts her gaze, shadowed, unshakable. She tells Haiji she wants to learn everything he knows because one day she'll be strong enough to protect everyone in the White Wolf tribe. With her goals locked in, she tilts her gaze to her companions and declares she wants to stick close to Haiji and Cruel. Cruel beams at the idea, but Haiji's eyes widen, totally shocked by how serious she's being. With a bright, fearless shout, she seals her choice for good, and her eyes close as a happy smile blooms. After her fierce cry, Haiji whips around to Sue's parents and admits her choice could land them in trouble. Then they cut him off mid-sentence, telling him it's absolutely okay. He tells them this is the road their daughter picked for herself, and Surya chimes in softly, saying all they can do now is trust her and act from there by taking the case to court. Haiji stays quiet, eyes locked on their words, clearly deep in thought. With her parents' blessing, the moment to leave finally hits, and Haiji, Sue, and the Cruel Wave tearfully say goodbye to the gathered White Wolf tribe, who cheer them on for the road ahead. Then, as they step out together, Haiji and Sue link hands and a brand new bond snaps into place between them. In Wiral's massive throne room, King Veiled III sits high on his throne with his minister right beside him, while an armored hero from Duking stands in the distance, her voice ringing out as she snaps the truth. They've been beaten again. King's face twists with raw frustration as he snaps that Hirokani's rare power, Guardian of the Wind, should have made her untouchable compared to every Hiro who came before. Right beside him, the other Hiro, Haiji, grimaces, nods along, but they both know the ugly truth. He slams his armored head to the polished floor in a desperate bow, shouting that he has to know why, if they were so strong, how they still got crushed. The king can only stare, stunned into silence by the sheer pain on display. Right after that crushing failure, Kanna's voice slices through the tension, steady, sharp, and unshakable, as she declares that the soldiers aren't the ones to blame for the loss. Kneeling beside Haiji, she keeps begging. She doesn't care what punishment they throw at her, but she begs the king to spare the soldiers. She dips her head so low it's almost a bow, formally begging his majesty for an answer, and the king, fingering his beard, scrutinizes her words, asking if that's truly all she wants to say, while Kanna steps in and declares that every single shred of blame for the defeat lands on her. That declaration hangs there like a knife. Then a jolt of shock flashes across her face, and the moment it fades, her eyes go cold as she steels herself for the crushing truth of being a defeated general. Far from the capital, the scorching sun pounds a forest path, and the original hero wipes sweat from his brow, firing off, "So, has Cruel been found yet?" Nearby, Cruel and Sue comb through the woods, and Sue points ahead like she's sure this is the spot. Watched Cruel, his horned companion, lash her net toward the tree trunk and shout that she'd finally found it. Following her stare, he spotted a huge dripping chunk of honeycomb. Sue, The cat-eared girl practically vibrated with joy as she pointed it out, swearing that honey was insanely sweet and totally her favorite. Meanwhile, Hagi shoved his hand toward something else in the tree, demanding to know what it was. A giant, Hercules-like beetle pinned the moment in place as it chomped down on honey, and he couldn't help but notice the eerie match back in his world. Insects like this were everywhere. Sue stared, totally lost, while Cruel leaned in and pumped her up for what was coming next. Sue took that as her signal. She dashed forward with her net, shouting for everyone to wait up, while Haiji, breathless to keep up, fired back that she shouldn't push too deep into the woods, warning her about what could be out there. His warning hit at the perfect moment. Then the bushes rustled, and a massive bear burst into view, wearing a weird crown-like robe on its head. He immediately got it. The honey's scent had lured that thing in, and he snapped to attention with a gasp. A crown bear. Then the beast exploded into a ferocious roar. As the bear lunged and lifted a massive claw to smash down, Cruel and Sue screamed his name in pure terror. Sue tensed for impact. But right then, a young woman with long dark hair appeared at his side and fired up a complex, glowing, magical artifact. A brilliant blast ripped out of the device, smashed into the crown bearer and launched upward, blasting through the air. Then the savior emerged in her true form, gripping a glowing orb of light. Haiji froze in disbelief and blurted her name. She smiled, finally greeting him after ages, and warned him she wouldn't let him summon her just to toss her aside. Sue practically shoves a cup into her hands, beaming the whole time. So Indu takes a sip and instantly recognizes barley tea, shocked because it's the first time she's tasted it since she landed in this world. Hagi laughs, saying cold barley tea is pure summer magic, then offers to grab her a cup too, and right beside him Cruel mutters that he's got another woman falling for him, calling him a filthy lecher. So Sue, hearing it, shoots back, "Wait, where'd you even learn that word?" Cruel snaps Haji's attention to his women, and Haji quickly shuts it down. Those aren't wives, they're just his housemates. Then Can pivots to the Haji blacksmith shop, and Haji grins, saying Cruel and Sue both pitch in and help him with every job. The crew finally drops into the home's plain, rustic interior and the workshop beyond it. No frills, just a place built to work, not to cozy up. Later, deep inside the forge, Haiji leans in and tells Kanai, "This is where I'm working right now." He admits that being forced to meet Cruel and Sue has made blacksmithing weirdly fun, even with all the risks, and still, he's thankful to the king for giving him this chance. She stares him down and demands to know how his second life started in a place like this. Then she turns deadly serious and tells him she's got plenty of questions, because she wants him to teach her how to forward disorder. At the anvil, Kane slams her hammer down with jaw-dropping force, and a brilliant flash erupts like lightning, while Haiji just stares, baffled, convinced she's masking her real feelings behind a perfectly crafted act. Cruel little jabs fly. "Kane, your form is perfect, just like hero Haji." And when Kane freezes, Haji starts wrestling with himself. Should he push harder to find out the real reason she came to him? Hain kicked off her forge training with Cruel barking instructions at her, and after a tense few days, she finally clicked with Cruel and Sue so smoothly that she started to feel like she belonged in their home. Kane bounced over and cheerfully asked Haiji what rice ball he wanted today, and Haiji grumbled that it didn't matter, though Sue practically burst with excitement and demanded one packed with wild vegetables. So Kane teased Haiji, laughing that he still just didn't get it. Several days later, her hard work finally paid off, a finished blade. She stepped up in front of Haiji, Sue, and Cruel, raised that gleaming sword high, and declared with pure pride in her voice that it was done. As he locked eyes on the weapon, Cruel said it straight. Sure, she'd helped, but that sword was undeniably Canny's work, forged by her own hands. Haiji just stared, stunned by the craftsmanship, and couldn't stop wondering, did Canny really make it herself? He snatched up the rapier, heart thundering as his mind raced. Honestly, for an amateur this was wild, and he couldn't shake the fear that his forge's strange, special magic had helped. Then he spun to Kane and demanded to know why she'd picked a rapier in the first place. Before she could even speak, he dropped a wild proposal and demanded a match with her, boldly saying he wanted to fight her, while Kane froze, reeling in stunned disbelief. He thrust the rapier out, primed for a fight, Then Kanae clenched the blade she just forged and a weird image started to bloom in her mind. That sudden challenge hit like a thunderclap, and Sue and Cruel just stared on from the sidelines, completely frozen in wide-eyed shock. She freezes in embarrassment as the sudden challenge hits, stammering while Haiji keeps pressing her for an answer. Meanwhile, Cruel and Sue watch from afar as the whole showdown plays out in the training yard. She steels herself and declares she'll test the sword's power firsthand, insisting she's strong enough to stand on her own, only for Haiji to totally shut her down, refusing to believe she could ever measure up, and demanding why she even needs to prove it. His question snaps her to a stop, and suddenly the real reason behind his suspicion clicks. Her sword is stamped with Haiji's name, and he leans in, pointing it out like proof, stunned that she's even testing a weapon she forged for someone else. He suddenly flips his whole attitude, throws his hands up like it's nothing and agrees, straight up making a wager. If she can land even one hit on him, he'll grant anything she wants. Then, with a sharp, confident grin, she takes the deal. That bright, easy vibe dies instantly when his face hardens again. He leans in and demands the truth, warning her straight up that he can't trust her if she keeps slipping things past him. To prove his point, he yanks a long katana free, its polished blade blazing in the light, then snarls that he wants her to teach him, step by step, what she's been hiding. Kan yanks her brand new rapier free with a razor-bright ring of steel, locks eyes with her opponent, and both fighters snap into position, because the duel is about to explode. The fight erupts in an instant. Haiji rockets forward, but Kanai slips aside and fires off a shocking glowing orb counter. Haiji's eyes go wide, stunned by the move. Krull watches in disbelief as Kanai finally fights back, and Kanai snaps that she's done retreating. She dodged Haiji's question like it was nothing, then sprang forward, not toward Haiji but straight for the Cruel One, so fast and so vicious that even Haiji and the Dragon Girl were left stunned and scrambling. Her blade slammed in with a blinding flash, metal exploded outward, and the hit knocked Haiji clean off his feet. Kanai stared at what she'd done, realization lighting up her face. He jerked himself to his feet, eyes locked on the shattered sword on the ground, and snapped, questioning her aim. Because you could tell she swung and forged too fast, too careless, all because she's still immature. If she'd truly thrown everything into it, that blade would never have splintered. He inched toward her, pushing for answers about what had her so hooked that it drove her to act that recklessly. Shock ripped across his face when he saw her clutch the shattered hilt, and when she looked up at him, her voice shook as she launched into a desperate plea. Tears streamed down her face as she sobbed his name, begging him to step in and save her master, Belphibia. She finally spilled the truth. The real danger was her master, now trapped in a demon's grasp. In a throne room, King Veiled I squares off against the armored hero, canny, cold fury burning behind his mask as he hammers down that her dream of rescuing Belphibia is unforgivable. Stunned, Canny can only blurt out, "Why?" From far away, you can spot Master Swordwoman Belphibia standing there, alone. The king steps forward and says, she's the Swordwoman of Purple Lightning and she saved countless soldiers in battle. Then he grinds the question like it's a blade. Why would they just toss aside someone so deserving? He keeps going, and with a sharp realization, he admits Belphibia's a talented swordswoman, but she still lacks the special moves a true hero has. Then he leans in toward Kanai and demands, "So you really think we should ditch the warrior just because of that?" The king lays out their grim reality, reminding her the kingdom has already bled so many soldiers in past wars. And when he says the only thing standing between safety and ruin is her presence, he pushes her to accept the truth. This kingdom needs her sacrifice. Then the royal minister snaps back, sending a rescue party would just mean more soldiers' blood on the ground. Kanna counters, furious and scared at once. With the demon lord's troops pressing in, they don't have the muscle to save Elphibia. So she clenches her jaw and declares it, if nobody else is coming, then she'll go alone. Kanna's defiant declaration lands like a bomb. Suddenly the king and his minister freeze in stunned silence, and Kanna whips her head back, reeling from their icy disapproval. King's face tightens as he jabs a finger at her, snarling that she won't step onto the battlefield solo. Heroes don't get thrown in without a real plan, and he orders her to snap out of it and keep her head on straight. With a cold, creeping grin, the royal minister declares that they'll seize every last weapon she's got. The minister's grin stretches way too wide and he leans down like he owns the air, telling the hero to rest easy. but his smug tone screams that she's about to become their prisoner. A calm, heavy certainty drifted over those far-off, snow-capped peaks like the world itself had just confirmed, so this is how it all ended up. Later on, Haiji and Canny trekked through a thick, shadowy forest, their heavy cloaks swallowing their shapes as they moved. He whipped his gaze to her, frustration sparking in every word, and demanded why she hadn't told him everything from the very beginning. Canny swallowed hard and said she never meant to wreck the peaceful life he had carved out for himself. Her mind slipped back to that moment when she'd watched him just vibing and smiling, totally at peace, until it all broke the instant she saw a monstrous bear slam into him and she knew she had to chase after him. She snapped back to the moment and asked if he was really okay with the path they were on. Then he brushed it off, scoffing that they didn't come this far for nothing. But even with all that swagger, Can confessed the truth. She was still scared. Her resolve didn't waver, it burned hot because of Belfair, who had been the first to fully recognize Sesai Jink for who she was, so there was only one path left: rescue her. Their journey finally slammed them right up against a dark, foreboding stretch of woods. Can told them this was the very edge of the demon tribe's territory, and the forest felt downright cursed. Right before she went on, she told me this. About 2 weeks ago, a war between the Wurel Kingdom and the demon tribe was fought right here, and her intel swears there's a fortune of mithril, even late dormant, buried beneath the Black Forest. It all boiled down to one brutal fight, control of those priceless deposits, between the native demon tribe and the invading humans, and the result was instant. The kingdom, along with Canna and Belfair, got crushed and had to slam retreat to the north. She strides beside Haiji through the forest, grilling him about where his hero's gear went, and then admits her own weapons were seized the moment she got cast out. He grins and tells her skirt choice came from Cruel and Sue's suggestion, and when a shy blush crawls across her face, she fidgets with her cloak, only for him to reassure her, smiling like it's no big deal. He rips the conversation toward weaponry, half drawing a katana, then smirks and asks if borrowing her sword was a smart move, because honestly he's hinting she should be the one swinging it. He grins and tells her, "Don't stress, I've got my own secret weapon." Canna studies him, eyes wide with curiosity, and then he urges them to move because Belfair's going to start freaking out. Right on cue, the sky flips and a brutal downpour crashes down. Back at their lodgings, Cruel stands at the window, worry written all over her face as she watches the rain pound the world. Her back stays turned to the room as she keeps staring at the storm, whispering Haiji's name under her breath, her voice trembling with worry as she asks out loud if he's okay. Her mind snaps back to right before he left. She stood in front of him at the door, firing questions, begging to know why he had to go, and he just said he was leaving, then ordered her to stay put and keep watch. She laid out her reasons, admitting she'd seen how strong he was, then hitting the point that made it terrifying. That was exactly why he couldn't afford to leave her behind, because she had to stay and shield Sue. And the moment his total trust in her landed, she couldn't take it. Cruel, flustered heat exploded, and a deep blush flooded her face. She stood rigid with arms crossed tight, tension snapping off her face. Then Sue reached out, hand hovering in concern. Sue lunged in, wrapped her arms around the dragon girl and squeezed her tight in a comforting hug, then looked at Cruel and promised, "It'll be all right." Cruel sank into the quiet warmth of it, nodding as if to say, "Yeah, Hoggy will come back." Side by side, they stared out the window as rain drummed down, counting the minutes until he returned. Far out in demon territory, Haiji and Canny pushed through a pitch-black forest until Canny's scream tore the air, "Haiji, get down," and he spun around, startled. Her warning hit the moment a giant, clawed foot slid into view and slammed onto the forest floor, quiet as a shadow. Two hulking, horned beastmen burst out of the shadows, torches blazing as they stomp through the woods, their grim, powerful presence casting fear in every direction. Crouched beside Haiji, Kane leaned in and hissed that they'd stumbled into demon territory, warning him to watch every sound, because her kind hears everything. Haiji nodded, but the look on his face said he wasn't just listening, he was plotting the next move. He leaned in, a faint grin tugging at his lips as he pointed out how close his face was. Then Can froze, staring back, totally rattled by his sudden comment. Kane lunges in and clamps a finger to his lips with a sharp hiss, shutting him up before he can even get a word out, her eyes blazing with alarm. Nearby, the beastman scouts they spotted earlier stand rigid and watch, one of them gripping a crude torch that slices through the dark. The beast men aren't just a few figures anymore, there's a whole pack, and their glowing eyes rake across the forest, hunting for trouble like a threat with a pulse. Hidden out of sight, Kan frantically rakes her fingers through her hair and whispers that a whole demon army is near, while Haiji, soaked in sweat from pure tension, admits he's terrified they're hunting for Belle. Then, right in the middle of the beastmen's ranks, something catches their eye. Those brutal powerhouses are shouldering an ornate palanquin like they're marching to deliver a VIP of absolute importance. With long pale hair and huge horns, the beast man sneers, cold as stone, saying the woman they're presenting to their lord is downright lucky, because she should have died out in the wilderness. Meanwhile, inside the palanquin, a figure in a white kimono just sits there, silent and unshakable. AG stares as the scene plays out, totally baffled, while Kanna listens to the beastman's words, quietly repeating the word Lord like it just unlocked something huge. With a bone-jarring thud, the beastmen slam the palanquin onto the force floor, and inside it the occupant stays perfectly still, hands folded like a calm queen while the curtain sways shut. The beastman leader's head whips toward them, his instincts screaming they're there, and he erupts in a roar. "Who's there?" Haiji's eyes flare wide, not with panic but with shock. He murmurs the captive's name like it can't be true. Belle-san, B. He stood there, completely frozen, while the beastman leader laughed over their discovery, and Kane still looked like he was ready to explode. Realizing they were cooked, he snatched Kane and yelled for them to run before they got caught, because once they were captured, rescue would be gone for good. Yet Kane froze, staring at him and demanding what they were supposed to do about their master. She shot back that they were going to fly and barked a warning not to bite his tongue. And before he even had time to understand, she launched him straight into the sky with a startled scream. A flash of light slammed into the clearing, and they touched down far from the mountains right as they'd just bolted. The moment they were finally safe, Kan dipped her head and thanked him with all her heart, because without Haiji she would have lunged in recklessly and paid for it. Still reeling from that sudden escape, he could barely get the words out, begging her to warn him next time, because what he'd just lived through, he admitted, was downright terrifying. Then he blurted out that it was his first time ever seeing her wild gift, Wind's Guardian, and he couldn't believe what he was witnessing. He even called it a fair trade, knowing that if she hadn't shown up, he'd have been swarmed by that demon to death. Meanwhile, far off, the beastman leader sat there stone still, replaying the standing order in his head. Humans get offered as sacrifices, and if anyone fights back, you kill them, no second thoughts. The word sacrifice hit him like a punch, and dread crawled up his spine, because if it was really meant for him, could they pull off a stealth infiltration of the enemy's position without anyone noticing? With grim determination, he thrusts a hand forward and locks in their mission. Yes, this is the spot. Right beside him, Kan confirms it with a sharp look. They've arrived exactly where they meant to. Ahead of them, tucked deep inside a brutal mountain range, sits a massive city, its towering spires glowing with a heavenly light pouring straight down from the sky. They sprint through the city's streets, cloaks snapping in the wind as they charge toward a towering central structure, right past a lone beastman guard who's standing there, clueless, like he can't even sense their sneaky approach. They slipped into that grand building and crept down a long corridor, holding their breath. Then, through an open doorway, they spotted their target, a high-ranking elven woman sitting alone by the window. Elsewhere in the stronghold, the beast men are too busy partying, blasting loud cheers in the grand hall, eyes glued to nothing but food and drink. The elven woman, blissfully unaware of the watchers, breathes out a heavy, exhausted sigh, her face instantly clouding with heartbreak. She can't help but wonder how fate tangled them into this mess, until her quiet thoughts get ripped apart as Haiji and Kanai stride through the doorway and his boot thuds on the stone like a warning. The elf matriarch snaps, stunned to her bones, and blurts Kanai and Haiji Dano's names, demanding why they're even here, and Haiji surges forward to explain it in one breath. Their answer was simple: they came to rescue her, and then he adds, relieved as hell, that Belfair's master is safe. Hannah barrels forward and clings to the elven woman like she's never letting go, while the elf matriarch is left stunned by the sudden closeness, wondering if they truly realize where they are, the demon trash domain. She tells her straight up that as a hero from another world, she can't really trust many people, and then she chokes back tears and pleads for the woman not to ditch her disciple and vanish alone. In the back, Haiji just stands there, taking it all in as the emotions crash between them. The elf matriarch's stern face melts into a warm smile as she strokes Canny's hair, whispering that this is the only way forward. She needs Canny alone for now. AG steps up, thanks the matriarch for brushing off Canny's emotional blow-up, then admits he's feeling the exact same way. Then he demands they bolt immediately before she's dragged into some ritual sacrifice, and he even calls her master straight to her face. Her face twists into pure confusion. A sacrifice? She blurts, replaying the word like it's stuck because it makes zero sense to her. Right then, a terrifying presence crashes the scene. An intimidating man in elegant formal wear steps in, and with a snap his feet twist from human shape into clawed, beastly things. He looms over you, stares you down, and growls, demanding how any puny human dared to trespass in his hall. Staring down the giant, Haiji finally clocks it. This towering beast man is one of the demon race, Lord Smirks, who rips into him with "What are you doing in my domain?" before Haiji clenches a massive fist and, right as it happens, he drops from above and slams into the stone floor with a cataclysmic roar, cracking the ground into a million pieces and blasting the chamber with a shockwave that flings everyone off balance. As the dust starts to drift down, Ken snaps, yelling at Haji to stay back. He's gripping a chunk of rubble, stunned speechless by the sheer force that just shattered the floor, while the beast man sneers and taunts, asking if Ken actually dodged the hit. Eyes blazing with pure panic at the shaking world, Haji snaps, "Bell, can I?" and roars for them to get behind him now before anything worse hits. Canny heeds his warning and flings the elf matriarch out of the way just as a colossal chunk of the ceiling crashes down. He watches the elf matriarch get slammed to the ground, rubble exploding around her, while the beastman lord looms above with zero concern, and the structure keeps crumbling at their feet. The matriarch tries to say she's fine, but her voice falters fast, the doubt creeping in. His focus snaps to Kane. She's down on the ground, badly hurt, kneeling like the world just crushed her. She shrugs off her own pain and begs Haiji to flee with her master. All he can do is sob her name, staring in shock, sick with horror. Right before anyone can even move, the beast man lord drops in over them like a nightmare, towering above both of them and roaring that they're not going anywhere, their time is up, end of story, and Haiji clenches his teeth, furious and powerless. Staring down the towering figure, Haiji snaps that the elf matriarch and the wounded Kine need to stay calm, because they're wrong, totally wrong, and then he turns to her face and promises with absolute certainty that he'll protect her. That declaration jolts Kane in shock. She blurts out his name from her spot, injured and bleeding. Even the elf matriarch freezes, eyes snapping wide as a blush creeps up her cheeks, all because of his bold promise to protect her. She snaps back into control in an instant, a determined grin blooming as she hands both her life and her master's faith into the same hands, and right then Haiji's face turns stone cold, his grip biting down harder on his katana's hilt. He thrusts the blade forward and the tip starts to glow with a razor-bright light, while Canny's voice snaps from behind him, urging, "Watch, this is about to happen." From across the cracked, broken ground, the beastman lord looms without a shred of awe, then he snaps, asking if their talk is finally done, and orders the human to leave Belphibia at once, declaring that standing before him is simply impossible. He slams down a terrifying ultimatum: if Hagi won't walk away, he'll just kill him right there. Still, the hero won't break, sword at the ready, resolve locked in. Hagi bluntly names himself Hagi, and the beastman lord, Albik, smirks as he declares, "I'm the master of this domain." Albik then throws down a challenge: if Haiji loses, he has to atone for the sin of wrecking their sacred ceremony, but if he wins, Albik lets him walk out with both the matriarch and the Kana. Once the terms are sealed, Albik steps back and formally dares Haiji to a duel. He's locked in for the duel, hood up as the cloak swallows his armor, katana gripped at his side, the blade's tip barely skimming the cracked, broken ground while he stares down his opponent. Albik, the beastman lord, flashes a predatory grin and explodes forward, his gigantic cleaver sword raised high. While HG's eyes go wide, sweat drops as he braces for the strike that comes impossibly fast with. With a deafening clang, that colossal blade slams down. Hagi throws up his katana at the last second and the clash detonates a storm of sparks. He bares his teeth, staring at the brutal truth: this monster's strength is on a whole other level. Crushed by the brutal pressure, Albuk taunts him to see just how far the hero can bend, So Haiji snaps back, shouting at the beast man, Lorda Brown. From the sidelines, the elf matriarch glares and studies every move, and the power gap hits her like a verdict. If this keeps going, Haji's defeat is only a matter of time. Albert then barrels forward, mocks him as he slams Haji's blade to a stop, and sneers that it's a great sword just completely wasted in the hands of its current wielder. Hannah's eyes lock onto the duel, and it hits her like a bolt of lightning. She recognizes his moves, realizes he's baiting Albec's attacks the same way she did in her own fight. The elf matriarch whips around, spilling her worry, and calls out, "Kane." But Kane stays calm, smiles her off, and assures her that her master is totally fine. The matriarch still isn't buying it. She says Haji's weapon looks amazing, but his handling feels crude for a human, and with a blade like that, he ought to slice through anything. As she talks, the two fighters slam together again and again, steel roaring in a brutal clash. In a split second, he's left defenseless. His sword whips through the air, spinning toward the sky while Can watches from the side, her eyes snapping to the alarm as it hits her. The blade was repelled. With the enemy's weapon ripped away, the Beastman Lord towers over him and his huge blade hovers, ready to crush. Albert bares his teeth, snarling that his win is already in his hand. He slams the weapon down with bone-crushing force, blasting the stone into rubble, but Haiji already lunged aside, just barely dodging the impact. As Kane slams down, he cries out Haiji's name with pure worry, but Haiji grits through the pain and lunges for a small object at his hip, his face burning with fierce determination. He doesn't pull a sword, he slips out a tiny knife, simple as anything, and the Beastman Lord just stares, baffled, like, what is he even trying to do? A blade suddenly flashes with a strange, crackling glow, because this isn't just any knife, it's Hagi's own secret weapon, an S-rank kitchen knife forged by the man himself. Clutching that plain little weapon, he snaps the question to Albert, "So do you still want this fight?" And the Beastman Lord just freezes, stunned that everything shifted so fast. At last, the crowd gets it. Kane realizes the truth. That kitchen knife in his hand is the secret weapon he's been hiding the whole time. Albert swallows his pride and admits defeat, vowing to honor their deal by taking his bride. And Haiji? He's left frozen, staring in total confusion, stuck on one question: who in the world is this balsam bride? He just froze in total shock when Beastman Lord Albert snapped his focus onto the elf matriarch, and Albert casually dropped the bombshell. He started the duel because he wants to marry Belle in the first place. That hit made the elf matriarch's cheeks flare a deep, blazing red. She yanked her eyes away in pure embarrassment, and right there in her pupil a tiny heart popped into view. The truth slammed into Haji like a punch to the gut, and all he could do was blurt out, "Marriage." In the dead hush of the night, one eye jerks open. Consciousness snaps back to Belfair, the elf swordswoman, and she jolts awake in a strange bed, her body wrapped tight in bandages. A huge, horned beastman, Albert, charges into view, eyes wide with alarm and relief. "You're awake," he blurts. Belfair grabs the moment and starts explaining how she'd been in the Black Forest and got torn away from her companions. He tells her to calm down, reminding her she's still in pain, and right on cue, she grimaces and clutches her wounds like it hurts all over. Albi leans in to talk with the elf matriarch, grilling her about whether his actions even need a real reason. Then she just tilts her head and demands, "Where are we going?" Then he turns to the massive crowd of his warriors and roars that the Mazoku only back the strong, and he's convinced the humans already know about the fresh attack. His mind snaps back to the fight, watching that hero slice through his own subordinates with brutal, flawless swordwork. He'd been the final wall for his fleeing comrades, pouring out pure resolve, and Alba couldn't help but admire it, even while it got his own soldiers killed. An old, goblin-faced attendant creeps into Belfair's room and leans in close, promising that nobody who dare hurt their master is anywhere near. Then he tells her to stop rushing, take her time, and finally rest and recover. I swear, the elf matriarch sits there stone calm with Albert, and she tells it straight. If he hadn't shown up, she'd have died in the Black Forest. Haiji and Kani both looked crushed, and then it hit Haiji like a punch. This Mizuku, Albert, was the master's benefactor, the exact person he had drawn his sword on. Kani nodded in sync, whispering that she'd even called him an evil spirit, her face ghost pale with shock. They swallowed their shame and bowed hard to the Beastman Lord, both of them. Albert sat at the head of the long table like he owned the room, then waved it off with a dismissive flick of his hand. "It's okay," he said, calm as ever, and told them he understood why they'd want to protect their comrades. Her forgiveness barely even lands because Kana snaps upright out of nowhere and demands answers. Why is he marrying her master? Right beside her, the elf matriarch just calmly sips her drink with a soft smile while Albek lays it out. He won their duel, so it's over, case closed. The tale snaps back to where that duel was born. Once Belfair healed from her injuries, she's the one who marched up and challenged Albek herself, and the memory of her hit him hard. She was relentless, a truly terrifying fighter who fought like she had something to prove. Two combatants squared off, eyes locked like magnets, hanging in a breathless second of pure focus before the clash exploded. Belfair lunged with a silver blur, but the duel didn't end with skill. It ended when Albek smashed her blade to pieces, silencing the fight for good. He can't believe it because this was a Mazoku-style duel, a concept totally alien to the heroes. Back in the present, Haiji and Kanai are left totally stunned by Albet's story, and Albet keeps going, claiming that Mazoka tradition demands a woman who's beaten by a stronger male has to become his mate. And he admits he never once thought he'd run into someone stronger than him. Haiji snaps up off the ground, barking that he's a man and absolutely can't marry Albuk, but the Beastman Lord just snorts, claiming he wants strong women. Right then, the elf matriarch sweeps in, her robe slipping open to expose her back, and she smiles as she explains that's exactly why she can be his maid, leaving his two pupils completely stunned. AG, dripping with sweat and grinding his fist tight, explodes, demanding to know why humans and Mizoku are tearing into each other. Yet Beastman Lord Albek just lounges there and shrugs, "I don't know," then waves him off and orders him to go home, saying they're gearing up to intercept his people. Haynes slams his hand on Albek and demands, "Why so hateful to humans if you don't even care about the war?" Albek fires back that the Mizoku are a pure bloodline, not like the kingdom mixed with every kind of species. Then he makes it clear they don't go hunting for human land, but if the perfect chance shows up, they won't hesitate to seize the good territory. Albuk keeps watching and he scoffs, "Sure, humans used to be a real headache, but their new gear is shockingly pathetic." With a dismissive flick of his hand, he says, "We'd love a good brawl, but right now we're too busy gearing up for the great demon festival." He whips his head toward Kanai, worry carved deep across his face, and blurts out, "How are they even supposed to be enemies when the Mizoku are treating them like it's nothing?" After a beat of deep thought, it finally clicks for him. He swallows his pride and apologizes for that earlier outburst. Then he turns to Albuk and asks, "Is there anything I can do to help?" The Beastman Lord studies him for a beat, surprise flickering across his face, and snaps that the hero is still way too green. Right nearby, the elf matriarch chugs a bottle of wine and Albek goes, "I thought humans would be way more cunning." Then he spots it, just like Belfair. His new fiancée has a heart as pure as snow. Mid-swallow, the matriarch casually reveals the truth: she's a dark elf. The Beastman Lord snaps his focus back to Haji and blurts out a weird request. He wants a knife, but not a sharp one. A normal blade would be too risky for him to handle, so he demands something blunter, and Haji just stares, utterly baffled as the demand sinks in. He blinked in pure disbelief as the Beastman Lord lifted a palm and offered a brand new number, 500. And when Haiji started stammering, he only managed to spit the same number back, stuck wondering if he'd really heard it right. The Beastman Lord leaned in and pushed his offer even harder, saying the Mizoku could forge like no one else, even crafting swords laced with magic. Then he admitted he'd heard about the ugly, painful history between humans and his people, and swore he wanted to make trade right this time. Then he made it crystal clear, sure, the Mizoku usually shunned humans, but Haiji was different. Albuk straight up pointed at him and declared, "I trust you, you're the exception." Leaning in close, Albuk formally asked, "Haji, will you take this deal?" He said it was the truth, that they'd tried trading with other nations before, all because he was desperate to bring his own people what they needed. After a beat of silence, Hog's face hardened with resolve, and he gave his consent. At least, Albai made Haji's acceptance crystal clear. Then, once the deal was sealed, the Beastman Lord clamped down and firmly shook Haji's armored hands. Later on, the crew, Haji, Kanai and Belfair included, stood side by side in a wide open field, their bodies faintly glowing as they stared down at a far-off line of snow-capped mountains. Shellfair told her companions, "First, we're heading back to the royal palace." Kanai spun toward her, worry creasing her face as she asked, "Will your apprentice feel lonely without you?" She dropped into a deep bow to Haiji, gratitude flooding her voice, the kind she'd never be able to forget. Then he grinned at her and said, "We're from the same homeland, so don't you ever hold back. If you're ever in trouble, call me." She practically buzzed with excitement as she grabbed his hand and shook it hard, while Belle just stared with a deadpan face, and Haiji, deep in thought, realized his master and Canny had finally become close. Right as he started to think, both women clamped onto his arms. Haiji went completely wide-eyed. Can fired off, demanding when he decided she'd be his life partner, while Belle stayed cool and simple, asking him to confirm she really was his chosen partner. He stayed nailed to the spot, totally stunned, as Belle explained that she and Hagi had promised to be a pair even without a formal contract, while both women locked into fierce, death stare glares at the helpless hero. Their argument exploded. Belle snapped at Kane for disrespecting the master, and Kane fired back, accusing Belle of pushing Haiji into that promise after their duel. They both finally agreed, let Haiji decide, and they stared at him, waiting for the answer. They discovered he'd already vanished. Two women froze, staring at the empty air as his voice echoed from far away, calling their names while he slipped out of reach. He sprinted through the forest at blinding speed, tearing up ground fast to get as far away from that argument as humanly possible. He shot a quick look over his shoulder, relief washing over his face, and he felt sure he could finally make it to his destination with nothing else going wrong. He snaps his gaze upward. There's Cruel circling in that dragon form, then everything snaps into place when he spots her humanoid body and Sue comes bolting toward him, shouting with pure joy. He blurts out Cruel's name and you can hear the shock in his voice. In the very next second, he's slammed into a tight embrace. Sue and Cruel collide with him at once, their arms cinched securely around his back. Pressing their faces into him, eyes squeezed shut with pure relief, Sue broke into the happiest words. She couldn't believe he was back, and even that cruel echo seemed to sing, welcoming him home. He stays rigid in their arms, eyes blown wide in total shock, stammering like he can't even process what's happening. The three of them huddle together in that grassy field, letting the reunion breathe, open skies above, and for once, the whole world goes quiet. As the minutes tick by, night crashes in, and the whole scene glides over to a quiet wooden house, sitting peacefully under a sky blazing with stars. Next morning, Hagi jolts awake in a bed, stretches, and blurts out, "Is it morning?" Then a young man pops in through the doorway, grins at him, and says cheerfully that something cruel is coming. His words snap Haiji's face into pure shock, and the young man keeps going, saying he's already stoked the furnace and forged a bunch of items. Haiji is totally stunned, and all he can do is stammer, trying to make sense of what's happening. His confusion only grew when a familiar face popped up in front of him. He blurted her name, stunned beyond words, because Kanna was right there, grinning as she clutched a blacksmith's hammer and told him she'd chosen to learn smithing at this exact place. With a soft, closed-eye smile, she confessed she'd stepped out of her hero role, then leaned into the future and asked him for his guidance and support in whatever came next. After everything that just went down, Indukini officially moved in as a companion to Haiji, Cruel, and Sue, right there with their little household. New members stepped in and they charged ahead, building a whole extension onto the house for her while Haiji worked, his mind still racing back to the capital, where the king had to worry over whether the kingdom would survive without a tyro, Kanna. Still, the three of them teamed up and the new room was finished in a blink. Even with the build finished and standing strong, Hagi stared at their work and a troubled look crept onto his face. Something felt off and the unease wouldn't let go. From the doorway of the new room, Kan clocked the bad mood instantly and demanded what was wrong, with Cruel and Sue echoing every worry, while Haiji spun around and tried to wave it off with a shaky, "It's nothing." To brush off their worry, Cruel shoved the truth out of him, grilling Haiji until he finally admitted it was nothing. Then he tried to dodge the panic by claiming their food supply was totally safe. That deflection totally flopped. Haiji snapped back to them with a grim face and said the real culprit was the Tamagain, the special steel he swears by. Canny, baffled, demanded the details. Finally, the truth hit. His worries had an answer and it was brutal. He'd run out of it completely. Cruel, briefly stunned, thought she meant rice, but Hagi shut that down fast. He explained that the Tamahagin was the essential metal you needed to forge a truly good blade. She lifted that dark lump and swore it wasn't just any metal. It was steel tougher than iron, packed tight with few impurities. Then she grinned and confirmed, "Tamahagin has insane forge weld power. When you heat the iron and hammer it, it bonds like it's meant to stay together." which is exactly why it's used for Japanese swords. Then she leaned forward, practically vibrating, urging Haiji to teach her more as a hammer crashed down and glowing metal flared on the anvil. Tamahaging is forged through a totally unique Japanese method, Tatara ironworking, handed down to this world by the hero who came before. Mid-bite, because this whole thing felt downright cruel, Indukana blurted out, then asked her senior the real question. Without any Tamahaging, what are we even supposed to do? And pushed, would an A-rank knife really be enough? He told them the job wasn't for just any blade, it was for Albec, a demon tribe member, and Haiji remembered being pushed to make something with the same power as his own work, but he admitted the truth. Without the right material, he couldn't forge an S-rank knife. Right then, the workshop's master barged in and snapped that Albec had caused him a mountain of trouble, and he was still going to carry out his request. As he softly soothed Cruel's head, she blurted that she'd been hearing about this Albec, remembering how Belfair swore he was a good person. As the craftsman clocked their situation, his face hardened. Tamahaging wasn't something you just got your hands on, not easily at all. Cruel didn't flinch and shot back, so is it brighter and shinier than regular steel? He snapped into the truth, this wasn't something you could just whip up, and he didn't think anyone could make it except from his own forge. Then realization struck like a punch. She spun around, pointed at a nearby door and declared, I might have the exact thing saved in my personal treasury. With a confident grin, she swore her collection might have exactly what they needed, then left Haiji, Sue, and Canny staring with hopeful anticipation. Moments later, Cruel tore across the sky in her real dragon form, sweeping an ecstatic Can and Sue onto her back, Can bursting with joy that it was her very first dragon ride, while Haji down below shouted a warning not to let excitement get the best of them. The mighty great white dragon, Cruel, rockets toward a huge forested mountain right at a cave carved into its face, and as she soars she thinks, it'd be fine if only Hagi wasn't teasing me. But right on her back, Can snaps at Cruel for flying recklessly and a stern voice thunders in agreement. It is absolutely not okay. They hit the mouth of that giant cave, drop off the moment they land, and file in, while Haiji peers into the black entrance and fires off. So your treasure's really in there? Cruel, now in her human form with a huge club-like torch in hand, grins and says, Yep, come on, follow me. She ushers them straight into the cavern, snaps her fingers, and boom, the torch in her hand bursts to life, its flicker dancing across the wet stone as it lights the way for Haiji, Kanai, Sue, and that master craftsman ahead. As they push deeper, Canning nervously asks Haji if he thinks traps might be lurking, and Haji admits a treasury could absolutely be booby-trapped. Then Cruel hears it, laughs it off, and snaps back, why would she rig her own home? Her casual dismissal throws him off balance, leaving him stumbling over his words, and before he can even answer, Kana presses him, what weird thoughts were you just having? Then shrugs and points out at least there are no mice around. Her quick observation snaps him into motion. He whips his head around, scans the cavern, and dread creeps in as he realizes it's totally empty, not a single sign of life anywhere, and with that, he can't deny it anymore. The rumors about Dragon's Horde are real. Cruel spots his worry and flashes a cheerful grin, telling him not to stress. Her scent has soaked the cave so deeply that animals and most people can't even get close. Hagi catches that same whiff in the air, slaps a hand over his nose, and freezes as he realizes just how deadly her aura really is. After pushing deeper into the darkness, Kuru stops and proudly declares, We're here, my treasury. The cavern swings open into a massive chamber overflowing with glittering gold, jeweled treasures, and priceless artifacts. Haiji immediately warns, touch anything and you'll be stuck paying it off for the rest of your lives. Ken just stares in stunned silence while Sue's eyes light up and she blurts, it's all so shiny. She stared out at the mountains of gold and jewels, then snapped, how did you get all this? She said most of it was handed to her by humans, but once in a while non-human beings would doze off in her sacred space, so she'd stack treasures on them before they woke up and left like a thank you gift. Kene blurted out, asking if this offering thing was even a real practice. Cruel tilted her head like she'd never heard of it, and the moment she looked at Kene, it was like the armored hero was basically worshipped as a living god, while Cruel herself just stared at Kene as an ordinary, cute girl who didn't feel powerful at all. He kept staring at the crushing size of that hoard and it hit him. Maybe in this world, a holy dragon really can be dangerously close to a god, because a brutal, massive draconic image slammed into his mind and sealed the idea. As he was lost in thought, Kanai snatched an ornate black mask from the treasure pile and she asked if the design was an owl, until he snapped at her to stop grabbing things so carelessly. Out of nowhere, a faint voice from beyond echoed through the cavern, "I love you." The armored hero snapped his head around, fully rattled, and demanded to know exactly who was behind that whisper. Cruel immediately spotted Sue, and when Sue confirmed she heard it too with a nod, Kin froze solid, blushing hard as she gripped the mask and blurted the words back, "I love you." Cruel jabbed a finger at her and blurted that Kan-A was totally blushing, all worked up, saying the voice came from her, so Kan-A went bright red, stammered a denial and swore it wasn't her. Sue cut in instantly and cleared it up. Turns out they were totally wrong. That voice didn't come from Kana at all, it was coming from a mask she was gripping in her hands. While her crew was still trying to wrap their heads around the cursed mask, Kan-A winked, cracked a grin and blurted, "I'll check it real quick." Then she fired up her appraisal skill on the dark artifact. That appraisal didn't land on what they expected at all. It zeroed in on a bright, bird-shaped thing, a parent mask. It was a ranked D magical tool with one simple power: repeat memorized words, basically like having a parent who keeps talking back. All these magical treasures, pile after pile, made Haji's skin crawl with questions about where they really came from. Cruel, clutching the exact same parrot masks like she owned the sky, admitted she had no clue, saying she only hoarded every offering she'd ever received here, and that there were still way more where those came from. He snatched one up and grilled Cruel about what it was while Sue zeroed in on something else entirely, a tiny stone statue Cruel was holding. Kan gushed that it was pretty cute and Haji spun around, mask in hand, demanding why her taste was so wild. That question snapped Kan-A into a defensive mode like, "So my style is that weird?" Cruel didn't let it slide. She bluntly cut in that the mask was anything but cute, and Kan-A's face twisted with pure, obvious disgust. During the argument, realization hit Haji like a punch. He knew that voice they'd heard earlier had to be coming from the black mask, the one Kan-A was gripping, not those parrot masks. He shoved her to spill the password, but the Cruel mix-up snapped in. Haji's warning rang out, "Don't let the parrot mask fool you." Right when he was about to think things through, Sue popped in and shoved a tiny dog-like stone statue in front of him, saying she could hear something coming from it. So Haji just stared, completely confused, and told her he didn't get it even as she waved the thing at him with. She didn't even blink, she tossed the statue straight to the ground. Boom, an explosion of light and raw force ripped through the air. Haji shrieked at Sue to get back, then he threw himself into shield Cruel on instinct, but the blast wave still smashed him, Sue and Kan-A flying. She snaps upright in a cloud of dust and rubble, totally unbothered by the blast she just unleashed. Haji kneels beside her, panicked, asking if she's okay, and she waves off his concern, insisting she's fine, then jabs a finger toward the crater's center, begging him to see what's appeared. Her gesture pulled his eyes forward, and from the swirling smoke a brutal lion-dog statue stomped into shape, its stone body locking in as an awful, invisible force surged into the air, eyes blazing from the dark while a deep voice roared, "Give me the password." A stone guardian statue, crackling with brutal energy, slams into life. Its eyes flare with a vicious glow, and its jagged stone teeth snap out in a snarling, "Don't try me" roar. With this sudden threat crashing down on them, Haji and his crew, Kan-A, Cruel, and Sue lock arms and stand side by side, their faces blazing with shock and a hard, grim resolve as they stare down the animated beast. Before she can even finish her thought, the terrifying realization hits. She snaps, "I remember it," and points at the demon beast statue, saying it demands a password or it attacks. Kan-A, always practical, leans in and asks what the password might be while Haji whips around at her, eyes sharp, pushing hard for the answer. She scratches her head for real, forced a nervous grin, and admits she has zero memory of it. Meanwhile, behind her, Haji and Kan-A sag with pure exasperation. No password to calm it down, then the statue lunges forward and the whole group flinches back in terror. Haji clamps his jaw, knowing there's only one move left: fight. Kan-A steps up into the danger and snaps that she'll take the lead. She lunges forward and drives her sword straight into the creature's face. Then the statue snaps up with impossible speed, clamping down on the blade in its brutal jaws with a thunderous clank. A savage crack rings out as the steel blade slams into the statue's stone teeth and shatters, and Kan-A just gapes, hazy eyes wide in disbelief, staring at the broken weapon. The moment turns deadly, her cruel face sets into something harder and she decides that if it's come to this, then she's going to move. She's a blur, leaping straight onto the Guardian's head and clamping its jaws shut with her own bare hands, and Can just stares, shocked she pulled it off. Then Cruel snaps into action with a determined shout. "I'll take it from here." She wriggles against the moving statue, screaming at her companions to bolt, and with a jaw set in pure resolve, she tells them to run. She'll stop the monster herself. With a heavy heart, he realizes he can't just leave Cruel behind and charge at the Guardian by himself. He has to figure out who the statue's true master is first. The fight cuts off out of nowhere, *pop*, and the giant Guardian's glow collapses fast, snapping back into a tiny, lifeless stone figurine that just drops to the ground. She stumbles up the stairs, stunned that it's finally over, then, gasping for air, she spills the truth. It was a razor-thin escape. She admits the words she screamed, "Leave it to me," were the password, and then it clicks. She remembers she built the stone guardian herself long ago. Sue bursts forward right away, apologizing to Cruel, then turns around and praises her for the hard work, calling her truly amazing. Feeling proud of the praise, she whips around to Haiji, practically begging him to give her his own compliment. Yet he just grins, thanking her and praising her hard work. But then Kane cuts in fast, snapping that it all started with Cruel, since he'd somehow forgotten all about that dangerous creation in the first place. Then the scene snaps to a massive, glittering mound nearby. Haiji spots it and realizes it's Tamagang's Great Hall, with a stone statue buried straight in the middle of that precious ore. Hannah lets out a relieved grin and says, "Now we can finally forge that kitchen knife." Right beside her, Sue and Cruel erupt in celebration, and all those earlier headaches get tossed aside. Zai and the others watched as Haiji turned toward them, eyes sharp and thoughtful, and declared before they headed back he had something he needed to make, only for Kanai, Sue, and Cruel to stare back in stunned, shared silence. After he made that declaration, they ended up at a rough old forge. Hagi watching closely as Cruel grabbed a massive sledgehammer and started hammering the glowing Tamahagin with crushing, perfectly timed swings. That deafening clang tore through the air, then the hammer hit dead on, blasting a bright storm of sparks from the blazing metal. He stared at her work, eyes wide, then a Cruel pause hit and the message was clear. With that much weight to deal with, he'd rather forge it than cast it. Hagi nodded, catching exactly what he meant. She broke it down and said, "Sure, casting sounds easier, but the item they were making demanded real power. Only stacked layers of heat and forging could forge that iron into strength." Even though she understood the forging process, her face twisted with confusion as the ladle was brought out, roaring to life with iron, sand, and charcoal. They heated the metal to blistering temps to force the iron's structure to tighten, then kept folding and hammering it again and again until it forged into a brutal composite, so strong and so tough against impact, it felt unstoppable. He spilled his whole plan. Once that item was finished, they'd haul it straight into Krull's personal treasury, and the sudden twist hit her like a truck, leaving her frozen, stammering, and unable to believe it. She stands right in front of her treasury entrance, an enormous cavern carved straight into the face of a sheer cliff. Straight ahead, a colossal metal door reinforced like a fortress slams the path shut, and Haiji, Sue, and Kenny stare up at it, stunned by how massive it is and how much power it would take to break through. She can't believe it. She doubts AG would question a door this magnificent, until he shuts her down and says, "Yeah, it's necessary, because that check stops anyone with bad intentions from wandering in by mistake." He explains that the door exists to shield everyone from the deadly items sealed inside the treasury, so Sue immediately presses her head against Haiji and tells him he's kind, even as he swears it's way too soon for compliments. Then the whole crew lines up in front of a wall packed with bizarre masks. That one mask, carved like the head of a monstrous insect, breathes out a thick, dark aura you can practically feel. Hagi asks what they think, and even he admits he's shocked by it too. Sue shudders, calling it terrifying and cruel, while she can't look away as she simply stares at the mask, reaching out with her hand like she's desperate to figure out what's wrong with it. The second her fingers neared the mask, it burst with a crackling shadow, and she gasped, jerking her hand back like it burned. Sue clings to the trembling Cruel, trying to steady her with comfort. Hage reveals his trick. He rigged a mask trap that will forcibly shove away anyone who dares to touch it, and now they need a password for Cruel. Can jumps in, saying they should pick something she can remember in a heartbeat. Cruel straightens up, regaining her cool, and swears that after what just happened she'll never forget a word he said. Sue shoots her hand up, excited, and Can grins. She totally gets the plan. With her crew at her side, she watched the cruelty spiral. Then those cheerful monsters beamed back and screamed the chosen password in perfect unison. "Hey G, we love you." The declaration blindsided Haiji. He spun around, stared at them, and couldn't make sense of it as he demanded why they'd dare use his name as the password. Sue swore she'd never forget it, cruel eyes and a soft, knowing smile sealing the promise, then laughed that even after hundreds or even thousands of years it would still be burned into her memory, dead certain of every word. Haiji just stared, stunned, caught between shock and flat-out disbelief. He snapped his gaze away and raked a hand through his hair, pure exasperation spilling off him. Then Kane, watching closely, grinned and teased, "So, why are you staring everywhere but at us?" Right nearby, that stone guardian statue flickered to life with a gentle glow, its hard face somehow shouting one truth: this wasn't a password at all, it was a confession of love. The tension sat heavy in the air. Hagi snapped his eyes away, sweat rolling down his temple, and Kana, still cruel but visibly flustered, clamped a hand over her mouth to smother a grin as she said the whole exchange felt exactly like a confession.